Okay. So you ever just like get in your car, and you're
Yeah.
just driving, you're just going somewhere,
Right.
and all those road signs are just kind of like, they're just there.
Yeah. They just kind of fade into the background.
And they fade into the background, but they're everywhere.
They are.
And we're so used to seeing them,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of think we know what they all mean.
Right.
But today, we're going on a deep dive, and we are going to be talking about road signs. And I'm going to be picking your brain a little bit about all this stuff.
Sounds great.
Because, I was looking at this
Yeah.
this F-21 document you sent me.
Yeah.
And some of these signs, I was like,
Oh, really?
I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
Like I've seen them a million times.
Right.
But when I really stopped to think about it, I was like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
What is this really saying?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'm really getting it.
Right.
And
Well, yeah. So
let's jump right in.
let's jump right in.
So the first one that I noticed.
Okay. Was no trucks over 6.5 meters in length.
Yeah.
So the thing that really got me about that was 6.5 meters.
Okay.
Why be so specific?
Well, I mean, it's not totally arbitrary.
Okay.
I think it really comes down to a lot of engineering and safety considerations.
Okay.
Like I think about, roads that are very windy or narrow, maybe a mountain road or something with like hairpin turns and stuff.
Right.
Imagine like a huge, 18-wheeler or something
Yeah.
trying to make that turn. And
Yeah.
there's just not enough clearance or space. I mean, it could be a disaster.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that 6.5 meters could be the difference between, that truck
Yeah.
safely making that turn or
Right.
jackknifing and, causing a huge accident.
Right.
Or maybe even like the bridge weight limits.
Oh.
Some bridges can handle certain weights, and if a truck's too long,
Right.
it might be too heavy for that bridge.
Easy.
So,
That makes sense.
so when you see a sign like that, like no trucks over 6.5 meters.
Yeah. Right.
If you're driving, like a moving truck or something, or you're hauling a big camper,
Yeah.
you really got to like stop and think.
Absolutely.
Like, do I meet that requirement?
Yeah.
Do I need to find a different route?
Yeah. And it might be, a little bit of a pain to have to
Right.
go out of your way or take a longer route or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's way better than,
Right.
getting stuck or causing an accident or something.
Or getting a ticket.
Yeah, or getting a ticket.
Exactly. That's a good point. So, okay, so that was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get into a whole nother area,
Okay.
which is heavy trucks.
Okay.
So sometimes you see a sign that will say like, heavy trucks permitted on this roadway.
Yeah.
But then other times you'll see a sign that says,
Right.
no vehicles containing hazardous materials.
Right.
What's the difference?
Well, so I think with heavy trucks, it's like you were saying before about the bridge weight limits.
Mm-hmm.
Some roads are just built to handle heavier vehicles and some aren't.
Right.
Maybe the road surface isn't as strong or the shoulders are too narrow or there's some other reason why they wouldn't want a heavy truck on that particular road.
Okay.
But then the thing with hazardous materials,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother level.
Right.
You think about a truck carrying, volatile chemicals or something.
Right.
You don't want that truck driving through a
neighborhood.
through a neighborhood or a school zone or something like that.
Yep, that makes sense.
So those restrictions are there to really minimize the risk to the public.
Right. So it's not just about the road itself. It's about
Right.
what's around the road.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about the bigger picture.
Okay. So now the other one that always kind of cracks me up is trucks must enter inspection station when signals are flashing.
Oh, yeah.
Like every time I see that, I'm like, is there going to be like a big chase scene?
Yeah.
Is this like a movie?
I know, right? It sounds so dramatic.
Okay.
But, those inspection stations are super important.
Right.
They're really there to make sure that trucks, especially the ones carrying hazardous materials, are following all the safety regulations, checking their brakes, their tires, making sure everything's up to code.
Yeah.
It's about protecting the truck drivers themselves and the communities they're driving through.
There's like a little checkpoint to make sure that everything is on the up and up.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to those big yellow buses.
Okay.
School buses.
Yeah. Everybody knows those.
Stop for school bus when signals are flashing.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
But is there anything else to that?
Well, it seems simple, but it's really about protecting kids.
Of course.
They're some of the most vulnerable pedestrians.
Right.
And when that bus stops and those lights start flashing and that stop sign arm comes out,
yeah,
It's creating a safe zone for them to get on and off the bus.
Okay.
You know, drivers need to be extra careful and patient.
Right.
Because kids can be unpredictable.
Totally.
You know, they might dart out into the road without looking.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So that's a good reminder.
Yeah. Yeah.
For everyone to pay attention.
Absolutely.
Now, okay, so speaking of yielding.
Okay.
HOV lanes.
Yes.
High occupancy vehicle lanes.
Mm-hmm.
You know those lanes that have the diamonds?
The diamond symbol?
Like, how do those work?
So HOV lanes are basically designed to encourage carpooling and reduce traffic congestion by reserving a lane for vehicles with multiple passengers.
Okay.
So instead of everyone driving alone, you know, you've got 2 or more people in the car. You can use that lane.
Gotcha.
But the thing is, the specific requirements for how many passengers you need can vary.
Really?
Yeah, some places it's 2 or more passengers.
Okay.
Other places it might be 3 or even 4.
Wow.
It just depends on the area and the traffic pattern.
Okay.
And there's actually even some debate about how effective HOV lanes actually are.
Interesting.
Yeah, some people argue that they don't really reduce commute times that much.
Okay.
And that they just shift congestion to other lanes.
Mm-hmm.
But others say that they're a valuable tool for promoting carpooling and reducing emissions.
Interesting. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
No, definitely not.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I remember there was something about transit buses and yielding.
Oh, yes.
In the document. What was that about?
So you'll often see this sign on the back of transit buses.
Okay.
That says, yield to bus when signals are flashing.
Okay.
And it's basically a reminder to other drivers that when the bus is trying to merge back into traffic from a bus stop, you need to yield and let it in.
Okay.
It just helps keep things flowing smoothly.
Right.
And prevents any, like, awkward merging conflicts.
So it's like giving the bus the right of way?
Exactly.
Okay.
So.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, I got to admit, I usually just tune out all the signs when I'm driving, you know?
Yes, get it.
But after doing this little deep dive, it's really made me realize, like, there's so much thought that goes into them.
Yeah, there is.
It's not just random shapes and colors.
No, it's a whole system that's designed to keep traffic flowing smoothly.
Right.
And most importantly, to keep everyone safe.
Yeah. So next time I'm out driving, I'm going to try to pay attention.
I think everyone should.
I think so, too.
Yeah, it's amazing what you'll notice.
Yeah.
When you actually start paying attention.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, this has been super interesting.
It's been fun.
I really appreciate you breaking all this down for me.
Yeah, no problem.
And, yeah, maybe we should do another deep dive sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, until then.
Until then.
Drive safe.
You too.
All right.
Bye. All right, everyone, buckle up, because today we are taking a deep dive into Ontario road safety.
Sounds exciting.
You bet it is. You guys sent in a ton of official Ministry of Transportation documents, so...
Very smart move.
Yeah, being prepared out there is half the battle, especially on those crazy highways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've got excerpts from guides on driving commercial vehicles and, like, emergency procedures, all that fun stuff.
Oh, wow.
Now, I know you might be thinking, wait a minute, I don't drive one of those big rigs.
Right.
But trust me, there is so much good info in here for all drivers.
Yeah, it's really interesting how those regulations designed for specific vehicles actually highlight those universal principles of safe driving.
Exactly. So let's unpack some of this.
Okay.
First up, lights and sirens.
Okay.
Picture this. You're cruising down the 401, maybe you're blasting your favorite playlist.
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly you see those flashing lights in your rearview mirror. So what's the plan? What do we do?
Right.
Obviously, I think we all know to pull over for, like, ambulances and fire trucks. But these guidelines are saying that, you know those amber lights on tow trucks?
Yeah.
They carry the same weight.
Yeah, you have to treat them the same.
It's all about being aware of, like, recognizing a situation where somebody might be in danger. And
responding appropriately, which means yielding the right of way.
Exactly. And what's interesting is the specific distance they mention here.
Oh, really?
You can't follow closer than 150 meters behind an emergency vehicle responding to a call.
Wow, 150 meters. That's a lot.
How am I supposed to judge that when I'm driving?
Well, think of it this way. 150 meters is about the length of a city block.
Okay.
The point is, just give them lots of room to maneuver.
Okay.
And if you're passing a stopped emergency vehicle on a road with more than one lane, you need to move over a lane.
Gotta give them a clear path.
Exactly.
I am also curious about something else that the guidelines mentioned, those flashing green lights.
Ah, yeah.
What are those all about?
So those flashing green lights, those indicate volunteer responders who are using their personal vehicles to get to emergencies. They need our help too.
Yeah.
Just as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
So give them the right of way as well.
I have to say, before reading all this, I would have had no idea what those green lights meant.
Right.
Good reminder to brush up on the rules of the road.
Yeah, for sure. And, a good reminder of what could happen if you don't follow those rules.
Oh, yeah.
Ignoring these rules can lead to some pretty big fines.
Really? How big are we talking?
Like up to $4,000 license suspension, even jail time.
Whoa. Okay, so no Spotify playlist is worth that risk.
No, definitely not.
I think it's safe to say those flashing lights are a universal signal to proceed with extreme caution.
Yeah.
But you know what happens if you're the one on the side of the road needing help?
Oh, like if your car breaks down.
Exactly. That's where things get interesting.
Oh.
Don't worry, though, because we're going to get into all that right after this quick break.
Sounds good. That's where those emergency warning devices come into play.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people think flares and reflectors are just for like those big trucks.
Right, exactly. I always think like action movie.
Yeah, but they can be really important for anybody, especially if you're stuck on like a busy highway.
Okay, I get it, but let's be real here. Who actually keeps flares in their car?
Well, it's not really about the flares themselves. It's about being visible, especially if it's dark or, bad weather. You just want to make sure people can see you from far away.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So besides flares, are there other options?
Yeah, tons. Reflectors or LED lights, even a bright flashlight could work. And it's not like it's a law for regular cars, but having something like that in your trunk just in case is a good idea.
Okay, so let's say the worst happens and I'm stuck there on the shoulder. What should I do?
Well, the guidelines actually have some really specific steps for dealing with a breakdown safely. First, you want to pull off the road as far as you can.
Get out of the way of traffic.
Exactly. Then turn on your hazard lights. And if it's getting dark, dim or dark, turn on those low beams too.
Okay.
Remember that 150-meter visibility rule we talked about? That's really important here, especially if you're stuck around a bend or over a hill. Drivers need that extra warning time to slow down.
Okay, visibility. What about those warning devices? How do I use those the right way?
So here's the thing. If you're on a highway and the speed limit is over 60 kilometers an hour, those devices need to be 30 meters in front of A&D behind your vehicle.
30 meters. That's farther than I thought.
It is. It's all about giving those other drivers enough time to see you and react, especially if they're going fast. Think of it like creating a safety zone.
No, I like that. A safety zone around your car.
Exactly.
So I'm visible, I'm out of the way of traffic, my warning devices are all set up. What's next?
Call for help.
Right.
Whether it's roadside assistance or, 911, whatever you need, make sure you can reach someone who can help you get back on the road.
It's a good reminder. It's easy to kind of panic in these situations, but staying calm and remembering those steps could really make a difference.
For sure. It's all about being prepared and knowing what to do. And speaking of knowing what to do, let's talk about fire.
Oh, okay. This one's a little scary, but important.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to vehicles being able to prevent a fire is just as important as knowing what to do if one breaks out.
What really surprised me in these guidelines is that they really emphasize knowing what you're carrying in your vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about driving safely. It's about knowing if you're hauling something that could be dangerous.
Absolutely. Some stuff can be super flammable or even explosive, so you really got to be aware of what you're transporting.
Right.
And the guidelines point out some common causes of vehicle fires that people don't always think about.
Like what? Besides the obvious, I mean...
Things like soft tires or overheated brakes, even careless smoking.
I never would have thought about soft tires causing a fire.
It happens. You got to watch that tire pressure.
So let's say a fire does happen. What should I do?
First, pull over safely away from buildings or other cars. If you're towing a trailer, uncouple it if you can.
And call 911, right? Don't try to be a hero.
Exactly. Let the firefighters handle it. Of course, if you have a fire extinguisher and you know how to use it, that's a great first step. But if the fire's out of control, just get far away and wait for help.
Okay, we've talked about breakdowns and fires. Now, what about collisions? That's got to be the most stressful thing that could happen on the road.
Well, it's definitely not something anybody wants to experience.
Yeah.
But, yeah, being prepared is key.
So what are the most important things to remember if I'm in a crash, especially if someone's hurt?
First, remember that you have to stay at the scene and offer help. It's not just the law. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, if someone's injured, you could really make a difference.
And remember those emergency warning devices we were talking about?
Uh-huh.
Those are super important here, too. Use them to make the area safe. Alert other drivers and hopefully prevent another accident.
Secure the scene call for help. What else?
If you know first aid, use it. And even if you don't, just staying calm and comforting people who are hurt can make a big difference.
This is where having a good first aid kit and knowing how to use it comes in handy.
Definitely. And it's not just about treating injuries. First aid training also teaches you things like CPR and how to help someone who's in shock, which can be really important right after a crash.
It's like having a toolkit for emergencies. You might not need everything in it, but it's good to have it just in case.
And one more thing. Even if you're not directly involved in a collision, if it's safe, you should stop and offer help. Sometimes just being there and being calm can be really helpful for someone who's just been through something scary.
That's a great point. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from those flashing lights to breakdowns, fires, and collisions.
Yeah, we've talked about the laws, the ethical side of things, and those practical things you can do to stay safe on Ontario's highways.
And hopefully we've given you some things to think about to be more aware and more prepared when you're out there on the road.
It's not about being scared. It's about being informed and making smart decisions.
You know, one thing that really sticks out to me is how much emphasis these guidelines put on visibility.
Oh.
Whether it's pulling over for emergency vehicles, setting up warning devices during a breakdown, or making an accident scene safe, being able to see and be seen is just so important.
You got it.
Yeah.
It all comes down to giving other drivers enough time and information to react safely. We keep talking about that 150-meter rule, but it's worth repeating because it applies to so many different situations.
Think about it. If you're driving at night or in bad weather, you can't see as far. Add in curves or hills or heavy traffic, and it becomes even more important to make sure you're doing everything you can to be visible.
Right. It's not just about your headlights either. It's about using your hazard lights correctly, wearing reflective clothing if you have to get out of your car,
Yeah.
and just being aware how your actions might affect what other drivers can see.
It's about being proactive, not reactive, and making smart choices that put safety first.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Visibility is more than just seeing and being seen.
That's interesting.
It's about thinking ahead about potential hazards and making your intentions clear to other drivers and creating a safe space around you and others.
Yeah, it's like having a safety mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, going through all this information, it really makes you realize how much responsibility commercial truck drivers have.
Oh, absolutely. They're dealing with these huge vehicles, heavy loads, long distances.
That's right.
It's a whole other level of challenge.
And these guidelines we're looking at, they go into a lot of detail about the specific rules for commercial vehicles, especially when it comes to like emergency procedures and equipment.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, if you've got a big rig loaded up, you can't just pull over to the side of the road like it's nothing.
Exactly. So let's get into some of those commercial vehicle specifics. What really stood out to you in terms of how they deal with breakdowns and emergencies?
Well, one thing that really caught my eye was all the stuff about nighttime visibility. The rules are really clear on this. Any commercial vehicle on a highway, from like half an hour before sunset to half an hour after sunrise, it has to have enough flares, lamps, or reflectors.
So it's all about making sure those big trucks are visible to other drivers, especially when it's dark out.
Exactly. And remember that 150-meter rule we keep talking about?
Oh, yeah.
It applies here too. Those warning devices need to be visible from at least that far away.
That's a long way. It really shows how important visibility is for those larger vehicles.
And it's not just about having those devices. It's about knowing how and when to use them. The guidelines actually have a step-by-step process that commercial drivers are supposed to follow if they have a breakdown or are in a crash.
So it's like a whole system for staying safe, making sure those drivers are doing everything they can to protect themselves, their cargo, and everyone else on the road.
Exactly. And even though these procedures are specifically for commercial vehicles, there are definitely some good lessons for all drivers.
Totally. Like that part about pulling off the road as far as possible. That's important for everyone, not just truck drivers.
Absolutely. It lowers the chance of getting hit by another car, and it gives emergency responders more room to work. It's a small thing, but it can make a big difference.
You know what? Even if you're not required to carry flares or reflectors, having some kind of warning device in your car is a really good idea.
I agree. Being prepared is key. And that's true for everything we've talked about in this deep dive. Knowing the rules of the road, having the right equipment, and most importantly, knowing what to do in an emergency.
It's about taking those extra steps to be prepared, not just for yourself, but for everyone else out there on the road too.
We're all in this together, right? Driving is a shared responsibility, and part of that is looking out for each other.
Well said. It feels like we've really created a roadmap for safe driving in this deep dive. We've covered so much from yielding to emergency vehicles to those more serious situations like breakdowns, fires, and collisions.
We've looked at the laws, the ethical considerations, and those practical things you can do to stay safe on Ontario's highways.
And hopefully, we've encouraged you to think a little differently about safety on the road, to be more aware, more prepared, and more proactive when you're behind the wheel.
It's not about being scared. It's about having the knowledge and the confidence to make good choices.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. Driving is a privilege, not a right. And with that privilege comes a responsibility to ourselves, our passengers, and everyone else sharing the road.
Stay informed, stay prepared, and most importantly, stay safe out there.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time for another fascinating exploration. Until then, drive safely, everyone. Hey everybody, and welcome back. We got so many requests for this deep dive. I'm really excited to jump in. We're going to take a look at safe and efficient truck driving. And for this one, we're cracking open a real classic, a truck driving manual. The kind that's got those golden nuggets, even if you think you've seen it all on the road.
You know, it's amazing how this manual digs deeper than just telling you what to do. It's like it really gets into that nitty-gritty, like, here's the WHY behind it, all the mechanics, the physics, all that good stuff that helps you get the most out of your rig A&D. Keep her running smooth.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's kick things off with something every trucker knows: smooth starts. Especially when you're hauling a heavy load uphill. This manual, man, it really hammers home that gradual power, no slip in the clutch thing. I get why, but what's the real deal? Under the hood, what's going on?
Well, think of it this way. You know how in a little car, if you slam on the gas, it jerks you back? It's kind of like that. When you dump that clutch with all that weight, you're basically shock loading the whole driveline. That's all those parts that send power from the engine to the wheels. Do that too much, and things start wearing out, breaking down, and then you're talking big bucks to fix it.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing riding the clutch too much, that just makes things heat up like crazy, which is never a good thing.
You got it. That clutch, it's meant to connect and disconnect smooth and easy. When you're slipping it, it's like you're rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together. All that friction, heat buildup, it chews up the clutch face, and before you know it, you're looking at a replacement way sooner than you should be.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, smooth power delivery. Like, more like a ballerina, less like a bull in a china shop.
You got it. Finesse, my friend. It's all about finesse and really understanding what forces you're working with out there. All right, so let's jump into something that might sound a little scary at first. The interaxle differential lock.
You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. That one had me stumped for a second. Sounded like something out of Star Trek. What does this thing actually do, and when in the world are you supposed to use it?
Okay, so picture this. You're on a road, it's slick, maybe some ice or something. Right. One of your back wheels, it loses grip and starts spinning like crazy, but the other one's just sitting there. That's when this little gizmo comes in handy. The interaxle differential lock. It basically locks up the differential between those two rear axles, forces them to spin at the same speed. So in those tricky situations where you might be losing traction, this thing gives you that extra grip.
Oh, so it's kind of like having four-wheel drive, but for your back wheels?
Yeah, you could say that. But here's the thing, and the manual really makes this point too. Don't go using it all the time. Why do you think that is?
Well, if it's making both wheels turn at the same time no matter what, wouldn't that be a pain when you're trying to turn on normal dry roads?
Exactly. When you turn those outer wheels, they got to travel a little further than the inside ones. And that differential, it lets them do that. But if you got that lock on, it restricts them, makes them work against each other. And next thing you know, you got extra wear and tear on your tires and axles. Imagine trying to walk with your legs tied together.
Not exactly graceful. So it's a tool for tough situations, but not an everyday thing.
Gotcha. And the manual, it has a good reminder about this. They say every once in a while, test that valve, make sure it's moving freely. It's like a little checkup to be sure it's ready to go when you need it.
Speaking of being proactive, let's talk brakes. And I don't just mean the mechanics of it. It's about you, the driver, knowing what to look for, catching those little problems before they turn into big ones.
Absolutely. The manual gets into different types of brake systems. You got your power-assisted and your non-assisted hydraulic brakes. So let's start with those power-assisted ones.
Okay, so what are we looking for here?
All right, first things first. Engine off, pump the brake a few times, get rid of any leftover power assist that's hanging around. Then put some decent pressure on that pedal and fire up the engine.
And what should happen then?
So when the power assist kicks in, you should feel the pedal drop a little and then stop. If it keeps dropping or doesn't drop at all, that's your sign that something's up with that power assist system.
Sounds like a straight shot to the mechanic, right?
Yep, no messing around with that. Now, for those non-assisted brakes, it's simpler. Engine off, good pressure on the pedal, hold it. If that pedal starts sinking, you got yourself a leak somewhere in the hydraulic system.
Man, can you imagine you're out on a delivery miles from nowhere and suddenly you realize those brakes ain't doing their job? Nightmare fuel.
You're telling me. These little inspections, they might not seem like much, but they can be the difference between a smooth ride and a real bad day.
All right, so let's get into some braking techniques. Beyond the basics, just hitting the pedal, what does this manual recommend for smooth, controlled stops?
They really emphasize this one thing. It's simple, but a lot of folks forget it. Steady pressure on the pedal, ease off as you slow down, and right before you come to a complete stop, give it a little tap.
Why that last tap? Seems kind of extra, doesn't it?
Nah, that little tap is all about finesse. Prevents that jerky stop, especially when you're hauling a heavy load. Think about it. Thousands of pounds of cargo. It doesn't just stop on a dime.
Right, it's like gently setting down a big old box instead of dropping it. But I've heard about fanning the brakes, pumping them fast. Any truth to that?
Good question. Fanning actually is a good trick, but only in certain spots. Like when it's slick out, it helps keep those wheels from locking up so you still have control.
So it's kind of like a controlled skid.
Yeah, you could put it that way, but here's the catch. Dry pavement, don't do it.
Why is that?
Because fanning actually lowers the air pressure in your brake system, and you need that pressure for your brakes to work right. On dry pavement, it ain't going to give you no extra control and might actually make it harder to stop when you really need to.
Okay, so smooth and steady wins the race, except when things get slippery.
You got it. It's about knowing the right move for the right situation. All right, so let's shift gears here, literally. Let's talk about tackling those long, steep downgrades. Now, those could be a real challenge.
Yeah, those long downgrades. Those can be a little hairy, even for the pros. What's the trick to getting down them safe and sound A&D without beating up your rig?
Anticipation, my friend. That's the key. You got to be thinking ahead. Pick the right gear before you start heading down that hill. Trying to downshift when you're already on the way down, especially with a heavy load. That's asking for trouble.
Yeah, I can see that. Talk about a bumpy ride.
The manual actually suggests using the same gear you'd use to climb the hill. Makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, it does, actually. It's like you're using the engine to kind of help you slow down, right? Like engine braking.
Bingo. Engine braking is your best friend on those steep descents. Basically, you're letting the engine's compression do some of the work to slow you down. That takes the strain off your service brakes so they don't overheat.
And nobody wants overheated brakes, especially when you're hauling tons of cargo down a mountain.
Not a good time. Oh, and here's a little tip from the manual. They say when you're climbing a steep hill at a slower speed, turn those hazard lights on.
Right. Just let everyone know you're moving a little slower than usual.
Exactly. Especially on those blind curves, you want to make sure everyone knows you're there. Okay, so let's switch gears for a minute and talk about something nobody wants to think about. Brake failure.
All right, yeah. Now we're getting serious. What's the game plan if that happens? What does the manual say?
First thing, stay calm. Don't panic. If you're on a level road and those brakes go out, first thing you do is downshift and get that engine braking working for you.
Okay, so slow down as much as you can using the engine, but what if that's not enough to stop?
All right, then you can use those emergency brakes, tractor and trailer both. But, and this is important, only if you absolutely have to.
Why is that?
Those emergency brakes, they're made for holding a parked truck, not for stopping a moving one, especially at speed. Use them while you're still rolling, and they could overheat, and then they might not work at all.
So yeah, not ideal, strategic use only. And I'm guessing after any kind of brake failure, don't even think about driving that rig until those brakes have been checked out, top to bottom, right?
You got it. Safety first, always. All right, let's talk about a technique that's all about smooth and steady. Balanced braking. What comes to mind when you hear that?
I'm picturing using the truck brakes and trailer brakes together at the same time to get a nice, even stop, like a dance between the tractor and the trailer. Got to make them work together.
You nailed it. And that trailer hand valve? That's your partner in this dance. Lets you put a little extra brake power on the trailer if you need it.
The manual actually has a whole section on jackknifing. You know, when the trailer starts swinging out, it really shows how important it is for the driver to be able to control both the truck and the trailer. Using those brakes just right can really make a difference.
Absolutely. Knowing how to use that trailer hand valve and all those balanced braking techniques, that's key to staying safe out there, especially when you hit those tricky road conditions or Got to make a sudden move. Okay, speaking of control, let's finish up with something that seems simple but is super important. Parking.
You know, you always see those movies where a truck rolls away, always good for a laugh. But in real life, that's no joke. Properly parking your rig is crucial for everyone's safety. What's the best way to do it, according to the manual?
They have a 3-step process, and the first one might seem obvious, but it's worth repeating. Set those parking brakes. You'd be surprised how many folks forget or don't set them all the way.
It's easy to get complacent, especially with the things you do 100 times a day. So what are the other steps?
Chuck those wheels. And not just the back ones, front AD back.
Yeah.
Especially on a hill or if the ground's not level.
You know what? I never thought about chalking the front wheels before.
It's an extra layer of protection, just in case. And last but not least, this is a big one. Never, ever rely on just the trailer hand valve or the tractor protection valve to hold that truck in place. Those valves have their jobs while you're driving, but they're not meant to be the only thing keeping a parked truck from rolling away.
So those valves are more like backup systems, not the main way to park. Chocks are king when it comes to parking safely, especially with how much these rigs weigh.
Exactly. It's about taking those extra steps to protect yourself, your truck, and everyone around you. All right, now let's talk about stopping techniques.
All right, so we've talked about slowing down, parking, but what about that moment when you gotta come to a full stop? Seems pretty basic, but I bet there's more to it than meets the eye.
You know, you'd be surprised. The manual, it's actually very specific about where you should be aiming to stop.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So where's the sweet spot?
It lays it all out like a checklist. First off, if there's a stop line, that's your target. If not, aim for the crosswalk. No crosswalk. Then it's the edge of the sidewalk. And if there's none of that, then you stop right at the edge of the intersection before you enter it.
I see. Makes sense. Stop where people expect you to stop.
Exactly. And of course, even when you're at that spot, you got to make sure it's all clear before you go.
Safety first. It's easy to just kind of go on autopilot, but following those guidelines, that's what keeps everyone safe. Well, before we wrap things up here, anything else from the manual that really stood out to you?
There's this one little thing, and it might seem small, but I think it says a lot about good driving habits. The manual, it says to use your right foot for both the brake and the gas pedals.
Huh. I've always done that, but never thought about WHY. It just feels natural.
Well, they say it's to prevent accidentally hitting both at the same time. You might think, oh, that'll never happen, but it does, especially if you're in a sticky situation.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You hit the gas when you meant to brake, that could be bad news.
Exactly. So even though it's a tiny detail, it just goes to show, building those good habits, making them second nature, that's what helps prevent accidents, especially in a big rig like yours.
Well, that about wraps it up. Smooth start, safe stops, everything in between. This deep dive into the trucking manual, man, I learned a lot.
What gets me is how it ties it all together. Like, here's this simple technique, but here's the science behind it, the physics, the safety. Really makes you think, there's always something new to learn, no matter how long you've been on the road.
Absolutely. It's all about keeping those skills sharp. And it makes you wonder, with all this talk about self-driving trucks, what's going to happen to all these driving skills? Will they still be important?
Now, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with all that technology in the future of trucking. Will human drivers still need all this know-how? Or will it be all about managing those computer systems?
Who knows? But no matter what happens down the road, those fundamental driven skills, they're the foundation. That's what keeps trucking safe and efficient.
Couldn't agree more. Even with all the fancy tech coming out, nothing beats a skilled driver.
That's right. So to all you truckers out there, keep on trucking. Stay safe out there, and we'll catch you next time. All right, so welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling the world of trucking.
Yeah.
Specifically all those rules and regulations that keep those big rigs moving safely on the roads. You ready to uncover some surprising facts about this industry?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we've got some great source material today. Stuff about the hitting the pin technique.
Oh, yeah?
And we've got some pretty unexpected exceptions to those strict driving hour rules.
Yeah. It's definitely more complex than a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at, how these regulations actually work, why they exist, and maybe even uncover some things you wouldn't expect.
Okay, so let's start with the very beginning, how a truck and trailer even connect. That fifth wheel coupling system.
Right.
I know there's this thing called a kingpin, but what makes that connection so secure?
Well, you're right. The kingpin is really the heart of the connection, that massive steel pin on the trailer. And it locks into the fifth wheel, the horseshoe-shaped part on the truck. Yep. But it's not just about, locking it in. You really need multiple layers of security there.
Okay.
You've got the lever latch plus secondary locks for backup.
Uh-huh.
And then drivers actually have to get out and visually inspect everything.
Wow.
A misstep here could be disastrous.
Yeah, so that's where hitting the pin comes in, right?
Exactly.
Can you explain the physics behind that test and why it's so crucial?
Yeah. So hitting the pin is a pretty low-tech but incredibly effective way to test that connection. Basically, the driver gently reverses the truck against the trailer.
Okay.
If they hear a solid thunk, that means the connection's good. But if it's anything less, they absolutely need to recheck that connection. It's like a final, foolproof check to prevent the trailer from detaching on the road, which
would be bad.
Could be catastrophic. Imagine that happening, at highway speed.
Yeah, that's not a scenario I want to think about. So besides the physical connection, you've also got to connect, air and electrical lines between the truck and the trailer.
Right.
I'm guessing it's not just a random hookup.
Oh, definitely not. The airlines, especially, they have a very precise system.
Okay.
So they're color-coded, which helps drivers connect them correctly.
Okay.
Blue for service brakes, red for emergency or supply.
Gotcha.
This standardization, it came about, after years and years of figuring out what works best. And honestly, it prevents some pretty scary mix-ups.
Yeah, I bet.
You wouldn't believe the stories.
Okay, I'll trust you on that one. So we've got our connections. What's next on the pre-trip checklist?
Well, before they even think about hitting the road, they absolutely have to raise the landing gear.
Right, the legs that support the trailer.
Exactly, those legs. And you do not want to forget that step.
I bet. I can imagine that could cause some pretty serious problems.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, picture this. You're driving off with those landing legs scraping against the road. You could cause damage to the road, damage to the trailer. You could even tip the trailer.
Oh, wow.
Not a pretty sight, and
Yeah.
definitely a major safety hazard.
Yeah.
So raising them fully and securing that handle is absolutely non-negotiable.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Let's see. Well, next they need to make sure the trailer has air. That means checking that there's correct air pressure and no leaks in either the supply or service connections.
Okay.
Then comes the final crucial check, testing the brakes.
Uh,
So the driver just moves the truck forward slowly, just to make sure those brakes are engaging properly.
wow. It's amazing how many seemingly little things have to be done right to operate these massive vehicles safely. I mean, the margin for error seems so small.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about knowing how to do it. It's about following those regulations.
Right.
And speaking of which, let's talk about Ontario's Commercial Vehicle Impoundment Program.
Oh, yeah.
They are serious about safety violations.
Yeah, from what I understand, if they find something wrong, that truck is not going anywhere for a while.
Exactly. They've got this list of critical defects. Things like problems with brakes, steering, wheels, tires, the frame, suspension.
Oh, wow.
Any of those, and that truck is impounded on the spot.
Wow.
We're not talking about a minor ticket here.
So how long are we talking about for these impoundments?
Well, the first offense is 15 days. But then if you get caught again within 2 years, it jumps to 30 days.
Oh, geez.
And then a third time within that same 2-year period, you're looking at 60 days off the road.
Wow.
Plus, the fines can reach up to $20,000 per offense.
Wow. That's a huge hit, not just for the driver, but for the entire trucking company.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really emphasizes how seriously they take safety in Ontario.
Absolutely. It sends a very clear message.
Mm.
Maintaining your vehicle is absolutely crucial, and cutting corners is simply not an option.
Right.
But ensuring safe operation goes beyond just the physical truck.
Right.
Driver fatigue is a major concern, and that's where hours of service regulations come into play.
Yeah, no, those regulations can be pretty complex, right?
They can be.
I know they break down a driver's day into different categories to prevent exhaustion.
You're right. There's off-duty time, there's time spent in the sleeper berth, there's on-duty driving time, and then on-duty time not driving.
Oh, good.
Each one has specific limits to ensure the drivers are getting, adequate rest. The goal is to prevent them from pushing themselves beyond safe limits. I mean, imagine the danger of someone driving a massive truck for 14 hours straight.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster.
That's terrifying. It's good to know these regulations are in place. So do they apply to all trucks and buses on the road?
So any commercial motor vehicle over 4,500 kilograms, as well as buses and school buses, they all fall under these regulations.
Okay.
But believe it or not, there are actually exceptions, and this is where things get interesting.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. Our source material mentions some pretty surprising exemptions, like pickup trucks for personal use.
Hmm.
So even if you have a massive heavy-duty pickup truck, you don't need to log hours.
That's correct. And the exemptions don't stop there. You've got tow trucks, motorhomes, even police vehicles are exempt from these regulations.
Wait, police vehicles? Really? That seems kind of counterintuitive given everything we've just talked about.
I know, right? It seems odd at first glance, but there is a reason behind it.
Okay.
In an emergency, response time is everything.
Yeah.
Imagine a police car having to stop mid-pursuit because the officer hit their maximum driving hours. It just wouldn't work.
Okay. Yeah, I see the logic there. What about tow trucks, though? Why would they be exempt?
Well, tow truck drivers, they often have very unpredictable schedules.
Right.
Long hours, unexpected delays.
Yeah.
It's a very different situation than long-haul trucking. Requiring them to stop, mid-job because they hit their driving limit just wouldn't be practical.
So it's about balancing safety with the realities of certain jobs.
Exactly. And in some cases, like with tow trucks, the nature of the work itself kind of helps mitigate that fatigue.
Okay.
They're constantly stopping and starting, getting in and out of the truck, so
Right.
they're not really driving for, hours on end like a long-haul trucker.
Right. Right. That makes sense. But our source material also mentioned an exemption that seems even more unusual, a temporary exemption for drivers affected by convoy protests. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so that was a very specific situation. Remember those protests at border crossings a while back?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Ontario government granted a temporary exemption to the hours of service rules for drivers who were stuck and couldn't complete their deliveries because of the blockades.
Oh, wow. So in that case, the priority was on keeping essential goods moving, even if it meant potentially increasing the risk of driver fatigue.
Right.
It must have been a really tricky decision to make.
Absolutely. It was a very difficult situation with no easy answers.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you've got this need to maintain the supply chain and get those essential goods delivered.
Right.
On the other hand, you don't want to compromise driver safety.
Right.
It highlights how regulations sometimes have to adapt to unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, it definitely shows that these regulations aren't just, black and white. There are gray areas where flexibility might be necessary.
Exactly. And that's why understanding, the rationale behind these rules and the potential implications of making exceptions is so important.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground already. We have.
From the mechanics of truck and trailer connections to the intricacies of hours of service regulations, it's clear that the trucking industry is heavily regulated, and for good reason.
Absolutely, but it's not just about regulations.
Right.
There's also a lot of technical knowledge and skill involved in operating these vehicles, safely and efficiently.
Yeah, we've seen that there's this constant balancing act between keeping goods moving and protecting everyone on the road, drivers and the public alike. But now I'd like to shift gears a bit and get your take on something. What are your thoughts on the future of these regulations, especially with the emergence of self-driving trucks? How do you think those will change the landscape? That's a great question. And something that has a lot of people talking. We're really on the verge of a major shift in the trucking industry.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating time to be talking about this because with autonomous trucks, a lot of the regulations we've discussed might need to be completely rethought. Like, for example, if you take driver fatigue out of the equation,
Right.
do hours of service regulations even make sense anymore?
That's a really good point. And what about that hitting the pin technique? Would self-driving trucks still need that kind of manual check, or would the coupling systems be completely different?
Yeah, there's so many possibilities, and we're really only just starting to explore them. It's almost like the Wild West of trucking right now.
Wow.
With all these new technologies emerging and challenging the traditional ways of doing things, it's It's going to be really interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, I'm already picturing self-driving trucks seamlessly connecting and disconnecting trailers, navigating traffic with precision, and maybe even platooning across the country.
Yeah, platooning, that's another fascinating concept.
Yeah.
Imagine a line of self-driving trucks, following each other closely, reducing wind resistance, and potentially improving fuel efficiency.
Right.
It could really revolutionize long-haul trucking as we know it.
It all sounds pretty futuristic, but it also makes me wonder about the human element. What happens to all the truck drivers out there if self-driving trucks become the norm?
That's a big concern and something that policymakers and industry leaders are really grappling with right now.
Yeah.
Some experts believe that self-driving trucks will actually create new jobs in areas like maintenance, logistics, data analysis.
Hmm.
Others argue that it's going to lead to significant job displacement, and
Yeah.
and we need to start preparing for that transition, now.
It's a really complex issue with no easy answers, and it brings us back to you, our listener. What are your thoughts on the future of trucking? Are you excited about the potential of self-driving trucks, or do you have concerns about the impact on jobs and the industry as a whole?
We'd love to hear your perspective on this. What aspects of this shift are you most curious about? What questions do you have? Feel free to share your thoughts with us. We're always eager to learn from our listeners.
Speaking of learning, let's shift gears again and dive into another aspect of trucking that often gets overlooked: the importance of proper cargo securement.
Ah, yes, cargo securement.
Yeah.
It might not be as glamorous as self-driving trucks,
Yeah.
but it's absolutely crucial for safety on the roads.
Right.
We're talking about making sure that everything in that trailer, from boxes to pallets to heavy machinery,
Hmm.
is properly secured and won't shift or spill during transport.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we've all seen those videos of trucks losing their loads on the highway. It's not just a messy inconvenience; it can be incredibly dangerous.
You're absolutely right. Improper cargo securement can lead to accidents, injuries, and even fatalities.
Oh, wow.
I mean, imagine a truck, losing a load of heavy steel beams on a busy highway.
Yeah.
The consequences could be catastrophic.
So, what are some of the key principles of proper cargo securement? What do drivers need to keep in mind when they're loading up their trailers?
Well, there are a few key things to consider. First, you need to understand, the weight and distribution of the cargo.
Okay.
You don't want to overload the trailer or have too much weight, concentrated in one area. That could affect the truck's handling and make it more likely to tip over.
So it's kind of like packing a suitcase for a trip. You want to distribute the weight evenly and make sure everything fits snugly.
Exactly. And just like with a suitcase, you need to use the right tools to secure everything in place. We're talking about things like straps, chains, binders, blocking materials.
Mhm.
Each type of cargo might require, different securement methods, and drivers need to be trained on how to use them correctly.
It sounds like there's a real science to cargo securement. It's not just about throwing some ropes over a pile of boxes and hoping for the best.
Definitely not. There are specific regulations and guidelines that drivers need to follow,
Huh.
and inspectors are out there checking to make sure those rules are being adhered to.
Okay.
There are even different types of tie down patterns, like diagonal, straight, or combination, depending on the cargo and the trailer configuration.
I had no idea. It was so complex. It's like a whole other world within the trucking industry.
It really is.
Okay.
And when you think about the sheer volume of goods being transported by trucks, every day,
Yeah.
the importance of proper cargo securement becomes even more apparent.
Right.
It's about protecting not only the driver and the cargo, but also everyone else on the road.
It's amazing how many different factors contribute to safety in the trucking industry. From the way a truck is coupled to the way cargo is secured, it seems like every step of the process is governed by regulations and best practices.
You're absolutely right, and it's a testament to the industry's commitment to safety.
Yeah.
Trucking is a vital part of our economy,
Right.
and ensuring that goods are transported safely and efficiently is a top priority.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the intricacies of coupling and uncoupling to the complexities of cargo securement and the potential impact of self-driving trucks. It's clear that the trucking industry is constantly evolving, but one thing remains constant: the importance of safety.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. The next time you see a truck on the road, take a moment to appreciate the skill, the knowledge, and the dedication of the people who keep our supply chains moving. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it.
Well said. And to our listeners, we hope you found this deep dive informative and engaging. As always, we encourage you to continue exploring and learning about the world around you. There's always something new to discover, and we'll be here to guide you along the way.
Yeah, I have to say, getting ready for this deep dive, I learned a lot. I really had no idea how much detail goes into, keeping those trucks rolling safely.
It really is fascinating when you start peeling back the layers.
Yeah.
We take it for granted so much, these complex systems and regulations that keep our world running smoothly.
Absolutely. And I think this deep dive has given us all a much better appreciation for the trucking industry, the challenges it faces and the people who work so hard to keep it moving. I'm glad you brought up the people behind the wheel.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the regulations and the logistics.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's the truck drivers who are out there on the roads, day in, day out, facing all kinds of conditions and challenges.
Yeah, you're right. They really deserve a lot of credit. It's a demanding job.
Oh yeah.
Requires skill, stamina, a whole lot of patience, especially when you think about, the long hours, the traffic, the weather,
right,
all the other factors they have to deal with.
And let's not forget the pressure they're under to deliver goods on time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the whole supply chain relies on them.
Right.
Delays can have, ripple effects throughout the economy.
It's true. They play a crucial role in keeping our world running. And as we've seen, their job is only getting more complex with the emergence of new technologies and evolving regulations.
It's going to be really, really interesting to see how the industry adapts in the coming years.
Yeah.
I mean, with self-driving trucks on the horizon.
Right.
The future of trucking is full of possibilities, but also uncertainty.
It's almost like we're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
On one hand, we have these exciting new technologies that could revolutionize the industry.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we have to consider the potential impact on jobs, on safety, on the overall economy.
And who knows what other challenges might emerge, right? New environmental regulations, changing consumer demands, global economic shifts.
Right.
It's a constantly evolving landscape.
Well, one thing is for sure, the trucking industry will continue to play a vital role in our lives, whether it's delivering the goods we need, transporting essential materials, connecting communities across vast distances. Trucks are the backbone of our modern world.
I think that's a great point to end on. Next time you see a truck on the road, just take a moment to appreciate that complex network of people, regulations, and technologies that make it all possible.
Well said. And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of trucking. If you're as fascinated by this industry as we are, we encourage you to keep exploring. There's a wealth of information out there, and we're always eager to hear your thoughts and questions.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those wheels turning.
See you on our next deep dive.
All right, let's dive into this, shall we? We're taking a deep dive today into the world of commercial truck safety inspections by request. When I first saw this topic, I have to admit, I thought, well, this is going to be a little dry, right? But getting ready for this, I have been really surprised by how much seemingly small details can really have huge implications for safety out there on the road.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you think about the size and weight of these vehicles, even a tiny defect can lead to, a really bad situation.
Exactly. And that is why I am thrilled to have you here to guide us through all of this. You always do such a fantastic job at connecting those dots, showing why these inspections are more than just checking off boxes.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm always amazed by how these seemingly small details can make such a big difference when it comes to safety.
So are you ready to unpack all this?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start our journey through a typical truck inspection. We'll be focusing on those key areas that can really make or break safety. And what better place to begin than with the system that brings these massive vehicles to a halt brakes?
Perfect place to start. And when it comes to truck brakes, it's not just a matter of hitting the pedal and hoping for the best. One of the first things inspectors look at is something called pushrod stroke.
Okay, pushrod stroke. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure what that is or why it's so important.
Well, think of the pushrod as the connection between your foot on the brake pedal and the actual braking mechanism at the wheel. When you press the pedal, the pushrod moves, and that activates the brakes. Measuring how far that pushrod travels, that's the stroke, is super important to making sure that all the brakes are applying force evenly.
So it's all about balance then.
Exactly. If the pushrod stroke is off, even just a little bit, it can mean that one brake is applying more force or less force than the others. And with a truck that heavy traveling at highway speeds, that imbalance can cause swerving, jackknifing, or even a complete loss of control.
Oh, that's pretty scary.
It is.
So how do inspectors measure this pushrod stroke?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One way is they'll actually mark the pushrod and measure how far it moves when the brakes are applied. Another way is to measure the distance between a fixed point on the pushrod and the brake chamber, both when the brakes are released and when they're applied.
So it's pretty precise then.
It has to be. Even a small difference in those measurements can be a sign of a problem. That's why inspectors have to be really careful and make sure they're getting accurate readings every time.
I'm starting to see why those inspections are so detailed. It really seems like every millimeter matters.
It does. And speaking of preventing those major problems, another important thing inspectors check is the tractor protection valve.
Okay, that sounds serious. What exactly does the tractor protection valve do?
It's a safety feature that prevents what they call runaway trailers. So imagine a situation where the trailer airline breaks, or even worse, the trailer detaches from the truck. This valve acts like an emergency brake and automatically engages the trailer brake so it doesn't just go careening down the road.
So it's like a backup system, a last resort kind of thing.
Exactly. It's there to prevent a potentially really, really bad situation. And to test the valve, they simulate a detachment by disconnecting the trailer service line, what they call the glad hand. It's the coupling point for the airlines and applying the brakes. If the valve is working correctly, it'll engage and prevent any air from escaping.
So they're basically tricking the system into thinking the trailer has come loose to see if it'll kick in properly.
Yep, that's exactly right. It's a super important test that can be the difference between a close call and a major accident.
I see, I see. What about the low air warning system? That's pretty self-explanatory, right? It just warns the driver if the air pressure gets too low?
Well, it might sound simple, but there's a specific pressure that's crucial here. The warning has to come on before the air pressure in the braking system drops below 55 psi. Truck brakes rely on air pressure, and if it gets too low, the brakes can fail completely.
Wow, okay. So it's not just about having a warning light, it's about that light coming on at the right moment to give the driver enough time to react.
That's exactly right. If the warning system is faulty, the driver might not realize there's a problem until it's too late.
I'm starting to get a sense of just how complex all of this is. It's not just about having brakes, it's about having all these safety mechanisms in place to prevent those brakes from failing.
Yeah, and it shows how all these parts are connected. One problem can lead to another, and then you have a major issue.
So now that we know the truck can stop safely, let's talk about making sure it stays connected to what it's stopping. What about those coupling systems?
Well, yeah, you're right. Those connections are vital. Imagine a trailer coming loose on the highway. It just doesn't bear thinking about.
Absolutely not. The forces involved, it would be.
It would be catastrophic. That's why inspectors are really thorough in checking these systems. Whether it's a fifth wheel setup or a pintle hook, they're looking for any signs of weakness.
So fifth wheel and pintle hook, those are the two main types of couplers.
Right. A fifth wheel is what you usually see on semi-trailers, where a kingpin on the trailer locks into a horseshoe-shaped coupling on the truck. A pintle hook is more common on heavier equipment, where a lunette eye on the trailer connects to a hook on the truck.
Okay, so what are they looking for when they're checking those couplers? How do you know if there's a problem?
They're looking for any looseness, any extra play that could mean there's wear and tear or damage. For fifth wheels, they check to see if there's any movement more than half an inch in the forward or rearward direction. With pintle hooks, it's even less. Only 3/8 of an inch of play is allowed.
With that much weight, even a little bit of movement could be dangerous, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about making sure that connection is solid and can handle the stress of hauling heavy loads. And to measure this play, they use a specific procedure where they mark the fifth wheel and move the tractor forward and backward against the trailer brakes.
I'm assuming those locking mechanisms have to be in perfect shape too, right?
Oh, definitely. Any damage or problems with the locking mechanism is an automatic fail. And you know those safety chains. Those are not just for show. I once saw a near miss where a trailer started to come loose going uphill, and the only thing that kept it from completely detaching was one single rusty safety chain.
That's scary. Are there any regulations about how strong those chains have to be?
Absolutely. They have to be strong enough to withstand the forces if the trailer does detach, and they can't have any defects that would make them weaker. It really shows how important even those little details are.
Yeah. Wow. That's a powerful example of why these inspections are so critical. Every single component really does play a role. Okay, we've talked about brakes and those coupling systems, both super important for keeping those trucks under control and, on the road. But before we move on to some other systems, let's talk about exhaust systems. I know that a leak-free system is important for the environment, but I've heard there's a much more immediate danger that inspectors need to look out for, right? Exhaust fumes getting into the cab.
You got it. That's one of the first things inspectors check when it comes to the exhaust system. Carbon monoxide is a silent killer, and even a small leak can let those deadly fumes into the driver's compartment.
I can see how that could be a big problem on long hauls where a driver might not even realize they're being exposed.
Exactly. That's why they check the entire exhaust system, everything from the manifold to the tailpipe. They're looking for any sign of leaks, cracks, or damage. They also make sure that the exhaust system is attached securely and there aren't any loose parts.
So it's not just about finding leaks, it's about making sure the whole system is in good shape.
That's right. It's a complete inspection that aims to prevent any chance of exhaust fumes entering the cab.
All right, let's move on to another critical system, the fuel system. And I want to start with something that might seem obvious, but it can be easy to overlook. The fuel cap.
You'd be surprised how many times inspectors find a truck with a missing fuel cap. It might not seem like a big deal, but it can lead to fuel spills. And that's bad for the environment and a fire risk.
Right. Any fuel leak, big or small, is something you definitely don't want. What else do they check when they're looking at the fuel system?
Well, leaks, of course. But they also check that the fuel tank is securely mounted. They'll look at the straps and the mounting points to make sure everything is tight and in good condition. And the fuel lines, they check those for any wear, cracks, or damage, too.
So they're looking at every part of that fuel system.
Yeah, they don't stop there. They'll also check that the fuel filters, make sure they're not clogged and they're being changed when they're supposed to be. They even check the fuel gauge to make sure it's accurate.
I would never have thought about checking the fuel gauge during a safety inspection.
It might surprise you, but a faulty fuel gauge can cause real problems. A driver might think they have more fuel than they actually do and then end up running out in a dangerous situation.
That's a really good point. It's all about preventing those unexpected things that could put drivers at risk. What about a dripping fuel leak? Is that an automatic fail?
Absolutely. You just have to look at the news and you'll see how quickly a fuel leak can turn into a massive truck fire. It's incredibly dangerous, not just for the driver, but for anyone else on the road.
Okay, so we've covered brakes, coupling systems, exhaust, and fuel systems. What's next on our inspection list?
Okay, so we've got the truck stopping, staying connected, the engine's running clean, and no fuel leaks. What's next?
Well, now we got to make sure it can actually handle the load, right? So let's talk suspension. Yeah, we're not talking about just any car here. These things haul some serious weight. Where do inspectors even begin with something like that?
Well, it depends on the type of suspension. Some trucks have air ride, others have the more traditional leaf springs.
I've heard about air ride. Isn't that supposed to be a smoother ride?
Yeah, exactly. It uses these airbags filled with compressed air to support the weight. More comfortable for the driver, and it can help protect the cargo too, especially if it's something fragile.
So what are the inspectors looking for when they check that air ride suspension?
First off, they're listening for any hissing, any sign of an air leak. Even a small one can affect how well the suspension works. Then they'll actually get up close and look at the airbags themselves, any cuts, cracks, bulges, things like that.
Is there a big difference between a small leak and a damaged airbag? They both sound bad, but...
A small leak might just mean it needs more air, but a damaged airbag could actually rupture. You could lose suspension support just like that. Imagine that happening on the highway at, say, 65 miles per hour.
Oh, yeah. I don't even want to imagine. So how can you tell if one of those airbags is damaged? What should you look for?
Well, inspectors look for any signs of wear. Cracks, bulges, spots where the rubber looks thinner. Those are all red flags. Think of it like a balloon. If it's stretched too thin in one spot, it's gonna pop, right?
Right. Makes sense. What about those trucks with the leaf spring suspensions? What do they check there?
For leaf springs, the main thing is checking for broken or cracked leaves. Those are those long, flat steel strips that stack together. They work together to support the weight.
So if one of those breaks, is that a big deal? Or can the other ones kind of make up for it?
It depends which one breaks. If it's not one of the main leaves and it's just one, it might not be a huge problem. But if it's a cracked or broken main leaf, or if there are a lot of broken leaves, that's a serious issue.
Main leaf, so some are more important than others.
Right. The main leaf is the thickest one on top. It carries most of the weight. If that one goes, the whole suspension is in trouble.
It's amazing how these small parts can have such a big impact on safety.
It really is. To put it into perspective, imagine a Jenga tower. You can take out a few blocks without the whole thing collapsing, but you take out a key block, or too many at once, and the whole thing comes down. That's what can happen if the suspension's not right.
I think I'll stick to regular Jenga, thanks.
Ah.
So stopping power, connection, engine, and a solid base. What's next?
Something we all use every time we drive. Tires. But on a commercial truck, we're talking some serious rubber.
Yeah, I've always wondered how they check those giant tires for problems. What do they look for?
Well, it starts with something basic, but it's super important: tire pressure.
I mean, that's important for any vehicle, but I can only imagine how much more it matters when you're hauling tons of cargo.
You got it. Underinflation can cause a lot of issues. More wear and tear on the tire, worse gas mileage, and worst of all, blowouts. And a blowout on a truck that big, that can be a real disaster.
So how do they check the pressure? Do they just use one of those little gauges like I have in my car?
They might, but they're also trained to look for signs. Like an underinflated tire will bulge out more at the bottom where it meets the road. They'll also check the tread depth. They have a special gauge for that, and they measure it in a few different spots on each tire.
Okay, tread depth. That's how much rubber is left on the tire, right? I know there are rules about how much you need, but why is it so important?
It's all about traction, especially when the roads are wet or slippery. You know those grooves in the tire? Those channels help water flow away so the tire can grip the road. If the tread is worn down, you lose that grip, and it's much easier to skid or hydroplane.
Makes sense. What else are they looking at when they're checking the tires?
Well, they'll look for any damage cuts, bulges, cracks, anything that could weaken the tire. And they check for uneven wear patterns, which could mean there's a problem with the alignment or the suspension. And here's one you might not think of. They check to see if the tire's rubbing against anything else on the truck, like a brake line or a fender.
Wait, a tire rubbing on a brake line? That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. I've seen it happen where it rubs and rubs until it wears a hole right through the brake line. You could lose your brakes completely.
That's pretty scary. So they're not just looking at the tires by themselves. They're also looking at how they interact with the whole vehicle.
Exactly. It's all connected, right? Everything has to work together.
Okay, so far we've covered brakes, coupling systems, the exhaust, the fuel system, and now tires. What's next?
All right, so we've talked about the brakes, the coupling systems, the exhaust, the fuel system, and those massive tires. What else is left to check on these trucks?
Well, you know, all those things are attached to something pretty important, the wheels and the hubs.
So we're going even deeper now, getting down to, the core of how these trucks actually move.
Yeah, you got it. The wheels and hubs are what connect those towers to the truck and let them spin. And if there are any problems down there, it can affect the steering, the brakes, the whole stability of the truck.
So when an inspector is looking at the wheels and hubs, what are they looking for specifically? It starts with just looking them over, checking for any cracks in the wheels, dents, any kind of damage like that. They'll check to make sure those lug nuts are tightened properly, too.
The lug nuts, those are the things that hold the wheel onto the truck, right?
Exactly. And if those are loose, or even worse, missing, the wheel could come right off while the truck's moving.
Oh, man. That's a scary thought.
Hmm.
I'm really starting to see how even the tiniest things can make a huge difference when it comes to safety.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why inspectors are so careful and really pay attention to every little detail. They also check the condition of the hubs themselves, that central part of the wheel assembly.
Okay, so what kind of problems can you get with the hubs?
One thing that happens a lot is leaking wheel seals. The seals are there to keep the grease inside, so if they're leaking, it means the bearings aren't getting enough lubrication.
And that's bad because...
Well, if those bearings aren't getting the grease they need, they can overheat and seize up. And that can cause the wheel to lock up while the truck's driving. Not good.
So I guess the inspectors are listening for any strange noises that could mean there's a problem with the bearings.
Yep. They might even use a temperature gun to check how hot the hubs are getting. If one is a lot hotter than the others, it could mean there's a problem with the bearing.
Wow, it's amazing how thorough these inspections are. It's like they're trying to catch anything and everything that could go wrong.
That's the point, right? Find those little issues before they turn into big, dangerous problems.
It sounds like it takes a lot more than just going through a checklist. They really have to use their experience and their judgment, too.
Yeah, definitely. It's not just about seeing what's right in front of you. It's about understanding how all these systems work together.
This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes. I never realized how much goes into making sure these trucks are safe to be out on the road with us every day.
It's more than most people think, that's for sure. But it's a really important job, keeping our roads safe for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up here, what's the one thing you'd want our listener to take away from all this?
I guess it would be, when it comes to these trucks, every little thing matters. I mean, from the smallest parts to the biggest, everything has to be working right to keep those trucks running safely. And it's thanks to those inspectors, their hard work and their knowledge, that we can be confident those trucks are in good shape.
That's a great point. They don't always get the recognition they deserve, but their work has a huge impact on all of us. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and taking us on this incredible journey through the world of commercial truck inspections.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Ever see like a massive truck on the highway and think, whoa, how do you even get a license to drive that thing?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today.
Yep.
We're doing a deep dive into Ontario driving licenses.
Okay.
Specifically the ones that let you handle those big rigs,
Right.
the tractor trailers and everything.
It's a whole system.
Yeah.
It's not just like a one time you go and do a driving test.
Right.
It's a whole system that's meant to make sure that the roads are safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you'd think it'd be as simple as cars just bigger.
Yeah.
But looking at our sources here, it's a whole world of like classes and tests and medical checks and...
It's pretty involved.
Yeah.
For instance, most people think of truck licenses as one thing.
Uh-huh.
But in Ontario, there's a real key difference between what's called a Class A and a Class D license.
Okay, so from what I'm seeing, Class D is like your heavy-duty pickup truck license, right?
Yes.
But even I'm confused about the weight limits.
Okay.
Like, when do you need to switch over to a Class A?
So think of it this way.
Okay.
Class D is for when the weight really matters, but mostly in the vehicle itself.
Okay.
So like a dump truck that's hauling gravel,
Uh-huh.
that could easily be over 11,000 kilograms.
Wow.
Or you're towing a trailer, but that trailer is under 4,600 kilograms.
So I could tow like a small like camper or something with a Class D.
Correct.
That's interesting because I always assumed anything with a trailer needed a special license.
So there's that dividing line, and
Yeah.
it's all about that trailer weight.
Okay.
Once you cross 4,600 kilos, you're in Class A territory.
Gotcha.
Then you're talking about the big tractor trailers that are hauling.
Yeah, now I'm picturing those long hauls you see in movies.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense that that'd be like a whole other level of licensing.
Yes.
But then there's this thing called a restricted O license.
Okay.
What is that all about?
So that's sort of a stepping stone.
Okay.
You can actually do your Class A road test
Uh-huh.
with a smaller setup where the trailer doesn't have full air brakes. And if you pass that, you get what's called a restricted A license,
Uh-huh.
which allows you to drive certain combinations.
Uh-huh.
But you can't go to the full-size rigs until you take another test
Okay.
with a full air brake setup.
So you could technically get a Class A license without ever driving the biggest trucks.
You could.
That's interesting.
It's sort of a gradual progression.
Yeah, like a stepping stone, like you said.
Right.
Okay, well, now let's talk about, like, before you even get to the test.
That's okay.
Because there's a whole list of requirements just to be eligible, right?
It's-
That you have to be 18, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But you also have to already have a regular Class G license.
Correct.
So, like, why is that?
Well, you have to show that you can handle
Right.
a regular car safely
Yeah.
before you're even allowed to try to maneuver something much larger.
Yeah, you wouldn't hand someone a scalpel before they practice with, like, a butter knife or something, right?
Exactly.
But then on top of that, there's also a knowledge test specific to trucks and trailers. And is this where this official MTO truck handbook comes in?
That's exactly right.
Because that's mentioned all over in our sources.
The book you want to have.
Yeah.
Because it's the one that explains all the unique rules and regulations and safety considerations.
So it's not just about knowing how to drive, it's about understanding the whole ecosystem.
That's correct.
Wow.
Of truck operation.
Yeah.
And so that knowledge test really digs into that.
Okay, and then there's also you need a vision test and a medical certificate.
Correct.
And that makes sense, driving a big truck is a big responsibility.
A huge responsibility.
But what I thought was particularly interesting is that the doctor is legally obligated to report any condition that could affect your driving.
Right.
So it's not just between you and your doctor anymore.
Yeah, it really highlights how serious this is.
Yeah.
It's not just your driving skills, but your overall health and fitness to be behind the wheel.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Such a powerful machine.
Yeah, for sure. It puts a lot of weight on that doctor's appointment.
It does.
That's for sure. So you're not just getting checked up, you're getting clearance.
That's right.
To operate, something that could potentially cause a lot of damage.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that leads us to the main event, which is the road test itself.
Woo!
Okay,
Yes.
We're going to dig into that.
I'm ready. Let's hear it, because this sounds more intense than just parallel parking and merging onto the highway.
It is.
Yeah.
We're talking about a whole other level of skill and awareness.
Yeah.
You need to show that you can handle this vehicle in real-world situations under pressure.
Right.
And with a deep understanding of the capabilities and limitations.
One of the things that stood out to me in the source material is the time pressure.
Yeah.
They mention specific time frames for each part.
There is.
The test. And that sounds nerve-wracking even for experienced drivers.
It is. It simulates the real-world demands of driving this vehicle.
Yeah.
You need to be efficient and decisive in your actions. Whether you're backing up a trailer or maneuvering in tight spaces, there's no room for hesitation or second-guessing.
And then there's this thing about a daily inspection.
Right.
Which is not just looking over the vehicle. You have to explain the condition of each item to the examiner.
You do.
Huh.
And it's not just checking lights and tires.
Right.
It's demonstrating a thorough understanding of all of the vehicle's systems and components.
So you're like a mechanic, but also the driver.
You have to know it all.
Okay.
And for the Class A applicants, there's two more things that really set them apart.
Okay.
One is coupling and uncoupling the tractor and trailer.
Uh-huh.
And the other is backing the whole rig up.
Oh my gosh. Those both sound terrifying to me.
It requires a whole different skill set than driving a car.
I can imagine. Yeah.
You need to understand how the trailer responds to steering inputs and how to anticipate its movements.
Yeah, I can see why they say driving a rig is like operating a machine. And on top of all that, there's this whole checklist of things to remember for the day of the test. And some of it's beyond obviously study and make sure your vehicle works.
Yeah, it goes deeper.
Yeah, what's some of that stuff?
For example, it's not enough to just know the rules of the road from the handbook.
Uh-huh.
You actually need to familiarize yourself with the specific operating manual for the vehicle that you're going to be.
Wait, so different trucks have different manuals?
Yes.
Really? I thought they'd be pretty standard.
No.
Wow, okay.
Different manufacturers and different models may have slightly different operating procedures or safety features.
Okay.
Or even maintenance requirements.
It's like studying for a specific part in a play versus knowing the general plot of it.
Exactly. You have to know your vehicle.
Okay.
And another interesting thing is that they require wheel chocks for vehicles with air brakes.
Wheel chocks for vehicles with air brakes? Now, I have to admit, I have no idea why that would be.
This is a critical safety measure, and it's all about understanding how air brakes work.
Okay.
So they rely on compressed air to engage the braking system. Yeah. So if there's a leak or a loss of air pressure, the brakes could fail.
Oh.
So wheel chocks provide a physical barrier to prevent the vehicle from...
Okay, so it's like a backup in case the brakes fail.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, so you don't want a, multi-ton vehicle just rolling away.
No, you don't.
Okay, that makes sense.
And another gotcha from the checklist is corrective lenses.
Okay.
So even if your regular driver's license doesn't require you to wear them, if you need them for driving, you absolutely have to have them.
For the test?
For the test.
Okay.
No exceptions.
So they're saying, we know you might get away with it in your car.
Yes.
But when you're handling a truck, we need you to have perfect vision.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say you've aced the knowledge test. You've mastered your pre-trip inspection.
Yes.
You've, gone through the road test with all of its challenges, and you've got your license.
Right.
You're good to go, right?
Well, not so fast. If you're planning on using that license for anything beyond personal use.
Oh, okay.
That's another layer we need to talk about.
Yeah.
And that's the CVOR.
The CVOR. Okay, so it's not just about getting the license now. It's about entering the world of commercial vehicle operation.
That's right. And
that is a whole other deep dive.
That's a whole other ball game.
We're going to have to save that for part 2.
Stay tuned.
Okay, listener, we'll be right back. All right, so we're back, and we're diving into the CVOR.
Yes.
Which sounds kind of ominous, honestly.
It's not so mysterious once you kind of break it down.
Okay.
It's really all about safety. Making sure that everyone on the road is safe.
Okay.
Not just the truck drivers themselves, but anyone that's sharing the road with them.
Right, because now we're talking about businesses using these trucks, not just like individuals, driving for personal reasons.
That's right.
So what makes the CVR so different from just having like a regular driver's license?
It's all about accountability.
Okay.
And ongoing performance.
Okay.
So with a regular license, you pass the test, you get the card, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
But with a CVOR certificate, it's like you're constantly being assessed on how safely you operate.
So it's not like a one-time thing. You're being tracked over time.
You are being tracked over time.
And what are they what are they looking at?
So there's something called a CVOR record.
Ooh, a record?
A record.
Like a permanent record.
Well, it's not quite as scary as a permanent record, but it does keep track of your operation safety performance.
Okay.
And it's really divided into 2 main categories.
Okay.
Carrier information and reportable collisions.
Okay, so let's start with carrier information. What falls under that?
So this is sort of the big picture view of your operation.
Okay.
How many kilometers you're driving, how many violations you've had, and maybe most importantly, your safety rating.
Oh, okay. A safety rating, is that like a score out of 10 or something?
Yeah. It's a little more complex than a simple score.
Okay.
But it's essentially a way to compare your safety performance to other carriers.
Okay.
And they use a complex algorithm that takes into account a bunch of different factors.
Okay.
But your violation rate is a major one.
So every speeding ticket, every inspection issue, it all adds up.
It all adds up. Things like overloading your truck or having faulty brakes.
Right.
Those are going to really hurt your rating.
So they're like, hey, we see a pattern here. Are you taking this seriously?
Exactly. They want to see a commitment to continuous improvement.
Okay.
Not just sort of a reactive approach.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the other part is reportable collisions.
Right.
So that's any accident you get into goes on your record.
It's not just any fender bender.
Okay.
They're looking specifically at collisions that result in injuries, fatalities, or significant property damage.
Okay.
And it's not just about who was at fault, but also whether there were any preventable factors involved.
Yeah. So even if you weren't at fault, if they find out your truck wasn't maintained properly,
correct,
or your driver was fatigued, that could still count against you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They're really digging deeper to see if there was anything you could have done differently to prevent it.
Yeah. So it emphasizes that shared responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm starting to get why our sources were making such a big deal about understanding this.
It's a big deal.
It's not just some paperwork.
Yeah.
It's really about creating a culture of safety in the trucking industry.
That's right.
So what happens if your rating is bad? Like, what are the consequences?
Well, you don't get detention.
Okay. Good.
But there can be some serious repercussions.
Okay.
So it might start with increased scrutiny. From the Ministry of Transportation.
Okay.
So you might find yourself getting pulled over more often for inspections, maybe having your records audited,
right?
Maybe even facing some targeted enforcement campaigns.
So you're on their radar.
You're on their radar.
That sounds like a hassle.
It's a hassle, and it can be costly.
Right.
And if those inspections reveal that there are ongoing problems, the consequences can escalate from there.
Okay.
They can issue warnings.
Okay.
They can force you to make changes to your operation. They can even impose fines.
Oh, so they can hit you in the wallet.
It can hit you in the wallet.
Yeah, but it sounds like they're trying to work with you, not just punish you.
They do try to take a graduated approach.
Okay.
But in the most serious cases, where there's just a blatant disregard for safety or repeated violations,
right,
they can actually suspend or revoke your CVOR certificate.
Whoa. So they can shut you down completely.
I can shut you down.
Wow. Okay, that's a big deal.
It shows how seriously they take safety.
Right. They have a responsibility to everyone on the road.
They do.
So it's not just about avoiding penalties. It's about your reputation as well, right?
Absolutely.
Like you want to have a good safety rating.
A good safety rating can be a real asset for a business.
It shows you're taking it seriously.
It shows potential clients and partners that you're serious about safety. And that can give you a competitive edge.
Right? So it's like a report card for your business.
It is.
And everyone can see it.
That's right.
So it sounds like maintaining a good rating requires a lot of proactive effort.
It does.
You can't just ignore it and hope for the best.
It's about having systems in place,
Okay.
investing in your drivers,
Uh-huh.
and constantly looking for ways to improve.
Okay, so we've talked about, the scary stuff.
Right.
But let's talk about the practical stuff.
Let's get into that.
Like, how do you actually do it? How do you maintain that rating?
We're going to get into all that in part 3.
Okay, so listener, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with all those practical tips. All right, listener. We've made it to the final part of our deep dive into these Ontario driving licenses.
And we have.
We've decoded the classes.
Yep.
We tackled those tests. We even demystified the CVOR system.
Yes.
But now let's shift gears from, understanding it all
Okay.
to actually, like, how do you do it?
Right.
How do you maintain that stellar safety rating
Yeah.
and build a successful business, in the world of these commercial vehicles?
Right, because no one wants to be
Yeah.
sweating bullets every time they see a Ministry of Transportation officer.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you not be nervous every time you see a cop, basically?
That's right.
Yeah. So where do we even begin?
It all starts, I think, with a mindset shift.
Okay.
You got to think of safety not as a box to check,
Uh-huh.
but as the foundation of your whole operation.
Okay.
It's an ongoing process. It's not a destination.
So it's not just about following the rules. It's about building a culture of safety.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And one way to do that
Uh-huh.
is to have what's called a safety management system, or an SMS.
Okay, what is that?
So this is like a framework
Okay.
that guides everything you do,
Okay.
from vehicle maintenance to driver training to how you secure loads.
So it's like a blueprint for safety.
Exactly. It's about having clear policies and procedures,
Yeah.
making sure everyone's properly trained, and having systems in place to catch and address
Mm-hmm.
any safety concerns before they become big problems.
One thing that kept coming up in the source material was this emphasis on documentation,
Yes.
like keeping detailed records of everything. Why is that so important?
It's proof
Okay.
that you're walking the walk,
Okay.
not just talking the talk.
Right.
You're showing due diligence.
Okay.
You're demonstrating that you're taking safety seriously,
Uh-huh.
and it gives you valuable data to actually track trends
Right.
and identify areas for improvement.
So if an inspector shows up, you can say, hey, look, we're on top of this.
Exactly.
We know what's going on.
And it's not just for the Ministry of Transportation.
Okay.
It can actually help you manage your business
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
more effectively.
All right. So let's talk about the people behind the wheel.
Yes.
The drivers.
Very important.
They're a big part of this whole equation.
Huge.
Our sources really emphasize, investing in their training.
Yes.
But beyond just like the basic skills, what else is important?
It's about empowering them
Well-
to be your partners in safety.
Okay.
So make sure they not only know the rules,
Uh-huh.
but understand the reasons behind the rules.
Right. So it's not just top down. Everyone feels responsible.
Everyone is responsible.
Okay.
And that means ongoing training, too.
Uh-huh.
Not just a one-time thing.
Right. So keep them up to date on everything.
Everything.
And then, of course, the vehicles themselves.
The machines.
The machines, yeah.
Yeah.
Meticulous maintenance, I'm guessing, is essential.
Absolutely essential.
Like no cutting corners there.
No, you got to have regular inspections,
Mhm.
preventative maintenance,
Right.
addressing any issues promptly.
So it's not just about keeping the truck running.
No, it's about preventing breakdowns,
Right.
which can lead to accidents.
And again, documentation is key.
Documentation is always key.
Yeah.
Those maintenance logs are not just paperwork.
Right. It's proof
It's proof
that you're doing it right.
that you're doing it right.
And, we live in a world of technology.
We did.
So how does that play into all of this?
Well, those dash cams you see everywhere now.
Yeah. Are those actually helpful, or are they just there to catch crazy drivers?
They can be both.
Okay.
But in a commercial setting, think bigger.
Okay.
So electronic logging devices can help track hours of service,
Uh-huh.
prevent fatigue-related accidents.
Right.
GPS tracking can optimize routes, improve efficiency.
So it's not just about gadgets. It's about using data to be safer.
That's right.
And don't forget, you don't have to do all of this alone, right?
No,
There are organizations and consultants out there who specialize in this stuff.
there are.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed or you just want like a professional set of eyes,
Yeah,
you can reach out for help,
absolutely.
but they can provide training guidance audits.
All of that and more.
It's like having a safety coach in your corner.
Exactly.
That's reassuring.
It is.
So, listener, to wrap up this whole deep dive,
Yes.
remember operating a commercial vehicle in Ontario. It's not just about getting that license.
No.
It's about embracing this whole philosophy of safety.
It is.
It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Right?
It's about going beyond the minimum and really striving for excellence.
That's right.
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about protecting your business.
No.
It's about protecting lives, everyone's lives.
Including your own.
Yeah, including your own. All right, so listener, to all the current and future truck drivers out there,
Yeah.
stay safe, stay
What
informed,
we call trucking.
and keep on trucking. We'll catch you next time.
See you later. Ever wonder what to do if you're in a fender bender? Or worse.
Oh, yeah.
Today's deep dive is all about emergency procedures when you're on the road. And we're going straight to the source for this one.
Okay.
The Ontario Ministry of Transportation's Truck Handbook.
This handbook is,
Yeah.
it's packed with essential info, especially for those,
Yeah,
handling those larger vehicles. But honestly, it's relevant for anyone who's behind the wheel.
for sure.
Yeah.
Whether you're a seasoned pro
Yeah.
or just starting out,
Mhm.
knowing what to do in a collision is
Absolutely.
crucial.
Yeah.
So we're going to unpack the immediate actions you need to take,
Okay.
how to handle injuries if there are any,
Right.
and even some legal stuff you might not be aware of.
Yeah, let's start with those critical moments right after a collision.
Okay.
The handbook really emphasizes safety first and foremost.
Okay, so let's break that down. What are those initial steps you have to take?
While it might seem counterintuitive, but you shouldn't move the vehicles involved
Okay.
unless it's absolutely necessary.
Right.
Because sometimes, trying to clear the road quickly can actually cause more harm than good.
I can see that, yeah, you can worsen the damage or accidentally injure someone.
Exactly. So next, you want to turn off all engines.
Okay.
This will help reduce the risk of fire, especially if there's a fuel leak,
Right.
which is a real concern after a collision.
Yeah, it's interesting how those small actions can make a big difference in preventing
Oh, absolutely.
further danger.
For sure.
Now, warning approaching drivers is also super important.
Right. The handbook goes into a deep dive of the emergency warning devices.
Oh, wow.
But the key takeaway here is making sure that other drivers see the collision and slow down.
Yeah, especially at night or bad weather,
Mm-hmm.
those warnings could be life-saving.
For sure.
It's creating a safety zone
Absolutely.
around the collision.
Yeah. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about dealing with injuries, which is where things can get a bit more intense.
Yeah, the handbook does a great job at differentiating between those who are trained in first aid
Right.
and those who aren't.
Yeah.
It's almost like two separate sets of instructions tailored to each scenario.
So if you're trained in first aid,
Okay.
you need to assess the situation and prioritize treating injuries based on the urgency
Right?
and your level of training.
Yeah.
So thinking about things like clearing airways, rescue breathing, or stopping bleeding, those actions take precedence.
That makes sense. But for those of us who aren't trained medical professionals, what does the handbook advise?
Well, in those cases,
So-
it emphasizes common sense.
Right.
Things like covering the injured person with a jacket or blanket to help combat shock,
Okay.
and of course, waiting for trained help to arrive.
So whether you're a first aid whiz or just a concerned bystander, there's clear guidance on how to provide assistance while ensuring your own safety. But there's one thing the handbook stresses, regardless of your training level.
And that's staying with the injured person until help arrives.
Right.
Never leave someone stranded after a collision.
Of course.
It's about human decency and ensuring their well-being.
Okay, so we've covered those crucial first steps, dealing with potential injuries.
Yeah.
But what about those collisions where, thankfully, no one is hurt?
That's a great question.
What's the protocol then?
What do you think is the most important thing to do in that situation?
Well, I'd say securing the scene is still crucial,
Okay.
like you said.
Yes.
Those initial actions we talked about, warning other drivers, turning off engines.
Yes.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
You're absolutely right about securing the scene. It sets the foundation for everything else.
Okay.
But after that, the next critical step is calling the police.
Ah, of course.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered, when is it actually legally required to report a collision?
Right?
Is it just a good practice, or is there a legal threshold?
Good question.
Yeah.
In Ontario, you must report any collision to the police if there are injuries,
Okay.
or if the damage to vehicles or property exceeds $2,000.
So even if it seems like a minor fender bender,
Yeah.
if the damage is significant, You're legally obligated to call the police.
Exactly.
Got it.
But even for those smaller incidents,
Okay.
those with less than $2,000 in damage, you're still legally required to exchange information with the other parties involved.
Right.
This is where having a pen and paper in your glove compartment comes in handy.
So we're talking names, addresses, phone numbers, insurance information, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Having this information readily available can make a world of difference when dealing with insurance companies and potential claims.
Right.
It can even help prevent disputes down the road.
For sure. Yeah, it sounds like even in those fender benders, having those details can really streamline the process.
Oh, for sure.
But it's amazing how this handbook goes beyond just collisions. There's a whole world of driving knowledge packed in here.
It really is a treasure trove of information.
So give us a sneak peek. What else is in there
Okay.
that can help us all become better drivers?
Well, one thing that stood out to me was the emphasis on sharing the road.
Okay.
And it's not just about other cars.
Right.
We're talking cyclists, pedestrians, motorcyclists, even those massive trucks we were talking about earlier.
It's so true. It's easy to get tunnel vision when you're behind the wheel and forget
Yeah.
there are all these other
Oh, yeah.
people sharing the road with us.
For sure. And that's where the concept of right-of-way comes into play.
Okay.
Those situations where you have to yield to other drivers or pedestrians. And sometimes it can get a little confusing.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always second-guessing myself at four-way stops.
Yeah.
Trying to remember who goes first.
Yeah.
It can feel like solving a puzzle sometimes.
Well, the handbook lays out the rules of the road clearly,
Okay.
explaining those tricky situations at intersections, roundabouts, even when merging onto a highway. Knowing these rules can make navigating those situations much smoother.
Speaking of tricky situations,
Yeah.
how does the handbook address driving in, like,
Sure.
challenging weather conditions we get here in Ontario?
Right.
That always feels like a whole other ball game.
You're right. It is rain, snow, ice fog. They all change the game completely.
Totally.
The handbook has a whole section dedicated to this,
Wow.
explaining how these conditions affect your driving.
Okay.
Talking about things like reducing your speed, increasing your following distance, and even handling skids.
Ooh, skids. That's always a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about how the handbook tackles that.
Well, it actually gives some really practical tips on regaining control if you start to skid.
Okay.
It emphasizes staying calm, steering in the direction you want to go, and avoiding sudden braking or acceleration.
It sounds like it's all about staying calm and reacting smoothly.
Exactly.
I'm definitely going to have to brush up on that section. What other interesting points did you come across?
One that really surprised me was the section on drowsiness.
Okay.
It's something we often underestimate, but the handbook emphasizes that even a little bit of sleep deprivation can be just as dangerous as driving under the influence.
Wow. I had no idea it was that serious.
Ah.
I guess we all know how a lack of sleep affects our concentration, but I never really connected it to driving in such a direct way.
The handbook goes into detail about how even mild sleep deprivation can impair your reaction time, your judgment, your overall alertness behind the wheel. It's a sobering reminder that getting enough rest is a crucial part of being a safe driver.
So what does the handbook recommend if you start to feel drowsy while driving?
Yeah.
Is it just about, like, pulling over for a coffee break?
It actually recommends pulling over to a safe location and taking a short nap if possible.
Okay.
Or having that caffeinated drink, like you said.
Right.
It also emphasizes the importance of planning ahead,
Okay.
getting enough sleep before a long drive, and being aware of your body's signals when it's telling you to rest.
It makes sense that preventing drowsiness is key.
Yeah.
I'm definitely guilty of pushing myself to drive when tired.
Yeah.
But after hearing this, I'm going to prioritize rest.
Good for you.
Speaking of things we should be avoiding, does the handbook address aggressive driving?
It does.
Okay.
It has a whole section on recognizing the signs of aggressive driving, both in yourself and in others.
Okay.
It's about understanding that road rage is a real problem
Yeah.
and learning how to navigate those situations safely.
So what are some of those signs? I'd love to be more aware of them so I can
Sure.
steer clear of those situations.
Well, the handbook talks about things like speeding, tailgating, weaving in and out of traffic, honking excessively, and making rude gestures.
Right.
All red flags that someone might be driving aggressively.
It's almost like a language of aggression on the road.
Right.
And sometimes it feels contagious.
Yeah.
If someone's driving aggressively around you, it can be tempting to react in kind.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess that just escalates the situation.
Exactly. The handbook recommends avoiding eye contact, not engaging in confrontations.
Okay.
And if necessary, pulling over to let the aggressive driver pass.
Right.
Sometimes the safest course of action is to simply remove yourself from the situation.
Safety first.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we don't have to engage in those escalating situations.
For sure.
So we've covered sharing the road right of way,
Yeah.
challenging weather drowsiness, and even aggressive driving.
Yes.
What other scenarios does this handbook cover? It's like a driving survival guide.
It really is, and it gets even more specific.
Okay.
It talks about driving through construction zones, which are a whole other beast with all the lane closures and detours.
Oh, yeah. Construction zones are always a challenge.
Yeah.
It's like navigating a maze sometimes.
Yeah, excellent.
Patience is definitely key.
The handbook emphasizes the importance of slowing down, paying extra attention to signs and workers, and being prepared for unexpected lane changes or stop traffic.
Yeah. It's also important to remember that those construction workers are out there doing their jobs, often in dangerous conditions. We need to give them the space and respect they deserve.
Absolutely. And speaking of sharing the road, we can't forget about our furry friends.
Oh, right.
The handbook also has some valuable tips on handling encounters with animals on the road.
That's a big one, especially here in Ontario, where we're surrounded by wildlife.
Yeah.
I've had my fair share of close calls with deer and raccoons.
Yeah.
It's always a little heart-stopping.
The handbook recommends being extra cautious at dawn and dusk when animals are most active.
Okay.
Scanning the sides of the road for movement and being prepared to brake or swerve if necessary.
Right.
Sometimes it's about reacting quickly, but it's also about being proactive and anticipating those encounters.
Sometimes those encounters happen so fast, it's hard to react in time.
Right.
It's good to know there are ways to be more prepared.
The handbook also talks about the importance of keeping your headlights on at all times.
Oh, really?
Even during the day. It makes it easier for animals to see you and react accordingly. It's a simple change that can make a big difference.
I'm definitely going to start doing that. What other hidden gems are hiding in this handbook?
Well, it even tackles those distractions that can sneak up on us when we're behind the wheel.
Okay.
And I'm not just talking about cell phones.
Oh, I know what you mean. Eating while driving, fiddling with the radio, even getting lost in conversation with passengers.
Right.
It all takes our focus away from the road.
Exactly. The handbook emphasizes the importance of minimizing those distractions by planning your route ahead of time,
Okay.
setting your music or podcasts before you start driving, and of course, putting your phone away.
It's a message we hear all the time,
Yeah,
but it's worth repeating.
absolutely.
Distracted driving is a serious problem. And it's our responsibility to create a safer environment for ourselves and everyone else on the road.
For sure. What else does this handbook cover?
Yeah, it's like a never-ending source of driving knowledge.
It even covers what to do if you encounter an emergency vehicle,
Okay.
which can sometimes be a little flustering.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes it's hard to remember what to do in those situations.
Yeah, those flashing lights in your rearview mirror can definitely get your heart racing.
For sure.
The handbook outlines the proper procedure for yielding to emergency vehicles.
Okay.
It's about staying calm, pulling over to the right as safely as possible,
Right.
and waiting for the emergency vehicle to pass.
So once they've passed, we can resume driving safely.
Well, exactly, but the handbook also reminds us to check our surroundings before merging back into traffic to make sure it's safe to do so.
Okay.
It's about that extra level of awareness after an unusual situation.
This handbook really does seem to have it all.
It does.
We've covered collisions, sharing the road, challenging weather, even unexpected emergencies like
Right.
breakdowns and fires.
Yeah, it's incredible how much valuable information is packed into this one resource.
But before we wrap things up, there's one more layer to this driving onion that I think is worth peeling back.
Okay, I agree. We've covered a lot of practical tips and procedures.
Yeah.
But there's also a whole psychological aspect to driving that the handbook addresses.
I'm intrigued. What does the handbook have to say about the mental game of driving?
It dives into recognizing signs of aggressive driving, not just in others, but also in ourselves.
Okay.
It's about understanding the impact our emotions can have on our driving behavior
Right.
and learning how to manage those emotions effectively.
Yeah, it's so true. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment when you're behind the wheel.
Oh, yeah.
But being aware of our own emotional state is crucial for safe driving.
Absolutely. The handbook provides some practical tips
Okay.
for managing stress and avoiding those road rage situations.
Oh, like what?
Things like deep breathing exercises,
Okay.
listening to calming music,
Right.
even planning extra time for your journey so you don't feel rushed.
Those are great reminders. Sometimes it's the little things that can make a big difference in keeping our cool on the road.
For sure, a little zen in the commute can go a long way.
I like that.
And it's not just about managing our own emotions.
Right.
It's also about being predictable and courteous towards other drivers.
So, like, what do you mean by that?
Think about using your signals consistently.
Yeah.
Maintaining a safe, following distance.
Right.
Avoiding sudden lane changes or braking.
Yeah.
It's about communicating clearly with other drivers, showing respect, and making the road a less stressful place for everyone.
It's like speaking a common language on the road.
Exactly.
When we all follow the rules and communicate effectively,
Right.
it creates a safer and more enjoyable experience for everyone.
This deep dive into the MTO Truck Handbook has been fascinating.
It really has.
We've uncovered a wealth of practical tips and insights from handling collisions to understanding the psychology of driving. This resource has it all.
We've barely scratched the surface of all the knowledge packed into this handbook. But I'm curious, for you listening after this deep dive,
Yeah.
do you feel more confident and prepared to face whatever challenges come up on the road? Hopefully you've picked up some new tips and tricks to make you a safer and more informed driver.
And if you're eager to learn more, remember the MTO Handbook is available online for free.
That's right.
It's an invaluable resource for any driver.
Until next time, drive safe and stay informed. Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at commercial trucking in Ontario.
Okay.
Specifically, all those regulations and all the safety practices
Right.
that kind of keep things moving smoothly out there on the roads.
Yeah.
And we've got excerpts from an Ontario Commercial Vehicle Handbook.
Yeah, okay.
So this is real deal stuff.
Uh-huh.
And even if you think you know truck safety,
Yeah.
I bet you'll learn something new today during this deep dive.
Well, it's interesting because these regulations aren't just about, keeping truckers in line.
Right.
They really impact the whole industry,
Yeah.
the transportation industry,
Yeah.
drivers, the vehicle maintenance,
Right.
ultimately the goods and services.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So let's start with something that I think most people in the industry would be familiar with.
Okay.
The CVOR system.
Uh-huh.
But what I'm curious about is
Right.
how much weight it really carries.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting a certificate, is
Yeah.
it?
You're absolutely right. It's much more than a piece of paper. Okay.
The CVOR system actually tracks the carrier's safety performance.
Right.
And this is over a 5-year period.
Wow.
And it logs convictions and inspection results.
Okay.
And so even minor violations can actually add up and lead to some pretty serious consequences.
It's like even a couple speeding tickets could come back to haunt you.
Exactly.
Right.
An accumulation of minor infractions
Right.
can trigger warnings or audits.
Oh, wow.
And even sanctions like suspension or cancellation of the CVOR certificate.
Really?
Yeah, it's all about accountability,
Right.
holding those carriers accountable for maintaining, a high standard of safety.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about one mistake.
Right.
It's about a pattern of safe practices.
Exactly.
But some people might argue that this level of scrutiny creates a lot of unnecessary bureaucracy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are arguments on both sides,
Yeah.
Some would say that the system is overly complex and burdensome.
While others maintain that, it's crucial for ensuring safety on the road,
Yeah.
it's really a delicate balance
Yeah, for sure.
between enforcement and allowing businesses to operate efficiently.
Right. And the stakes are high, especially when we consider the size and weight of these vehicles.
Yeah.
And, our handbook has a whole section
Uh-huh.
dedicated to size and weight limits.
Right.
And it's more complicated than just, throwing a truck on a scale, isn't it?
You've hit the nail on the head. There are specific limits for width, length, and height,
Okay.
with some variations for specialized vehicles like snowplows.
Okay.
But calculating the weight,
Yeah.
that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
You have to consider the number of axles,
Okay.
the tire size, the suspension type,
Right.
axle spacing,
Wow.
and even the type of cargo being transported.
So a truck carrying feathers
Exactly.
would have different weight restrictions than one carrying, steel beams.
Precisely. Different types of cargo distribute weight differently. And that impacts the overall weight calculation. The regulations actually use multiple formulas
Right.
based on factors like the allowed weight per axle and the gross vehicle weight.
Gotcha.
The key here is that the lowest weight calculated
Right.
using any of those formulas becomes the maximum allowed weight.
That sounds pretty complex.
It is.
I can see why carriers need to be really diligent.
Yeah.
about their calculations.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that
Yeah.
not only the driver, but also the operator of the company.
Okay.
And even the shipper can be held responsible for exceeding those limits.
Oh, wow.
So everybody involved in the process
Right.
shares that responsibility.
Everybody needs to be on the same page.
Yep.
Now let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Talk about inspections.
Sure.
Those Ministry of Transportation inspection stations,
Mm.
they're pretty intimidating,
They can be,
you know?
but they're there for a reason.
Right.
These inspections are all about ensuring that vehicles are roadworthy.
Right. And that drivers are following the regulations.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that inspectors are looking for?
Well, they're looking at everything.
Okay.
From the driver's license and vehicle registration
Okay.
to the CVOR certificate
Mm-hmm.
and daily inspection reports.
Right.
They'll check the truck's brakes, lights, tires, and cargo securement.
Right.
Really looking for any potential safety hazards.
But it's not just paperwork. It's a thorough examination
Exactly.
of the vehicle and the load.
Yeah, and it's not just at those designated stations.
No.
Inspections can happen anywhere, anytime.
Really?
You know, an officer could pull a truck over on the highway
Wow.
for random inspection.
That must keep drivers on their toes.
It does.
Now, I've heard about this 160-kilometer radius exemption for logbooks.
Right.
Is that like a loophole that drivers can exploit?
Well, it's not quite a loophole.
Yeah.
There are specific circumstances where drivers
Okay.
who are operating within a 160-kilometer radius of their home base.
Might be exempt from keeping that daily logbook.
So there's some flexibility there.
Yeah.
But it's not free pass.
Exactly. The hours of service rules still apply, even without the detailed logbook.
Right.
And let's be clear, refusing an inspection can lead to hefty fines up to $20,000.
Oh.
And even license suspension.
Really?
And the same goes for refusing to adjust an overweight load.
Wow.
You know, it's just not worth the risk.
Definitely a strong incentive to stay compliant.
Yeah.
Now, our handbook goes into detail about tires and wheels.
Okay.
I'm guessing this is more critical than most people realize.
It really is. You know, think about it. These massive vehicles rely on those tires for everything.
Yeah.
Steering, braking, stability.
Right.
You know, a blowout at highway speeds could be catastrophic.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So what should drivers be looking for during their pre-trip inspections?
Well, tread depth is crucial. Regulations require at least 1.5 millimeters for rear tires
Okay.
and 3 millimeters for front tires on heavier vehicles. They should also be inspecting for any cuts, bulges, or uneven wear.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget about the wheels themselves. Any cracks or damage
Yeah.
could compromise the tire's integrity.
I imagine wheel maintenance goes beyond just visual checks, though.
You're right. One detail that often gets overlooked is the retorquing of wheel fasteners.
Okay.
After installation or removal,
Right.
it's recommended to recheck those fasteners.
Okay.
After driving a short distance, you know, around 80 to 160 kilometers,
Sure.
to ensure that they're properly tightened.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not something you'd think about, but it makes perfect sense.
Right.
Those vibrations on the road can definitely loosen things up over time.
Exactly. And that brings us to another often overlooked aspect of vehicle safety,
Okay.
the steering system.
Okay, what's the key thing to know about steering when it comes to these big rigs?
It's all about something called free play.
Okay.
And this refers to the amount of movement in the steering wheel
Right.
before the tires actually begin to turn. So too much free play means a delayed response and reduced control,
Right.
which is obviously a huge safety hazard.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem,
Yeah,
especially at higher speeds or in challenging road conditions.
exactly.
So how can drivers check for excessive free play?
Well, it's a simple check that they can do during their pre-trip inspection with the engine off.
Right.
They just turn the steering wheel back and forth,
Okay.
feeling for any looseness or delay in the response. If it feels off,
Right.
it's a sign that the steering system needs attention.
Gotcha. So it's all about being proactive and catching those small issues before they become big problems.
Absolutely.
Now, this leads us to what I imagine is the most important part of all this, cargo securement.
You're absolutely right.
Because it doesn't matter how well maintained the vehicle is
Right.
if the load it's carrying isn't properly secured.
Exactly. A shifting or unsecured load can cause serious accidents, even rollovers.
Yeah, so what are the essential things that drivers need to consider when it comes to securing their cargo?
Well, first and foremost,
Yeah.
they need to understand the specific requirements for the type of cargo that they're hauling.
Okay.
Different loads require different securement methods and devices.
Right.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
So hauling logs would be different from, say, transporting boxes of electronics.
Exactly. Logs might require chains and binders,
Okay.
while boxes might need straps nets or even specialized bracing systems.
Right.
The key is to prevent any movement or shifting during transit.
And I've always been curious about those loads that extend past the back of the truck.
Uh-huh.
Are there special rules for those?
Absolutely. Any overhang of 1.5 meters or more needs to be clearly marked during the day. That's typically done with a red flag or a marker. And at night or in low visibility conditions, a red light is required.
Right.
It's all about making that overhang visible to other drivers.
It's like a giant warning sign saying, give me some space.
Precise. And it's not just about the initial securement.
Oh.
The regulations actually recommend rechecking cargo security within 80 kilometers of loading.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not a set it and forget it situation?
Yeah.
Things can settle or shift during those first few kilometers?
Right.
So it's smart to double check.
It's all about vigilance and attention to detail.
Right.
When it comes to cargo securement.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes
Good.
to the complexity of commercial vehicle operation.
Yeah.
It's so much more than just driving.
It really is. These regulations, while they might seem burdensome at times,
Right.
are in place to protect everyone on the road.
And the impact goes beyond safety, right?
Absolutely.
These regulations also affect the efficiency of the whole transportation industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a delicate balance between ensuring safety and keeping costs manageable for carriers.
Yeah.
You know, it's a constant challenge.
For sure.
But ultimately, prioritizing safety benefits everyone in the long run.
That's a great point. Now, before we wrap up, is there anything else you think is particularly important for our listeners to take away from all of this?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that commercial vehicle operation is a shared responsibility.
Okay.
You know, drivers, operators, shippers, everyone involved in the process
Right.
has a role to play in ensuring safety and compliance.
That's a great way to put it. Now, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
With the rise of e-commerce and like the rapid pace of delivery
Yeah.
that we've all come to expect,
Mm-hmm.
how do you see these regulations kind of evolving in the future?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something that the industry is grappling with right now
Yeah.
as technology advances
Yeah.
and the demands on the transportation sector increase.
Yeah.
We're likely to see some, significant shifts in how these regulations are applied.
Do you think we'll see a move toward more automation?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how would that impact safety regulations?
Well, automation is definitely on the horizon. And it brings both opportunities and challenges.
Yeah.
On one hand, self-driving trucks
Right.
have the potential to reduce human error,
Uh-huh.
which is a major factor in many accidents.
Of course.
But on the other hand,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that
Right.
those systems are thoroughly tested and proven safe
Right.
before they become widespread.
It's almost like we're going to need a whole new set of regulations
Exactly.
for autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, and those regulations will need to address things like cybersecurity,
Okay.
data privacy, and liability
Right.
in the event of an accident.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue with a lot of moving parts.
It's fascinating to think about
Yeah.
how this industry is constantly evolving
It is.
and adapting to new technologies and new challenges.
Absolutely.
So to wrap things up for our listener today,
Okay.
what are the key takeaways that you'd like to leave them with?
Well, first I'd say that commercial vehicle operation in Ontario
Yeah.
is governed by a comprehensive set of regulations designed to protect everyone on the road.
Right.
We've seen how the CVOR system tracks carrier safety performance,
Right.
the importance of understanding those size and weight limits,
Right.
the role of inspections in ensuring compliance,
Yeah.
and those critical aspects of vehicle maintenance and cargo securement.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
but it's clear that safety is paramount
Absolutely.
in this industry.
Yeah, it's a shared responsibility,
Mm.
that requires diligence and attention to detail
Right.
from everyone involved, drivers, operators, shippers,
Right.
and even those of us who share the road
Yeah.
with these massive vehicles.
And as technology advances,
Yeah.
those regulations are going to need to keep pace
Yeah,
to ensure that safety remains the top priority.
for sure.
This deep dive has been incredibly informative.
Good.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us
My pleasure.
and with our listener today.
Always happy to do it.
And to our listener, we hope you found this deep dive valuable.
I hope so.
Until next time, keep learning,
Yes.
keep exploring, and stay curious.
Absolutely.
With the rise of e-commerce and like the rapid pace of delivery that we've all come to expect, How do you see these regulations kind of evolving in the future?
That's a great question, and it's something that the industry is grappling with right now as technology advances and the demands on the transportation sector increase. We're likely to see some, significant shifts in how these regulations are applied.
Do you think we'll see a move toward more automation, and how would that impact safety regulations?
Automation is definitely on the horizon, and it brings both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, self-driving trucks have the potential to reduce human error, which is a major factor in many accidents. But on the other hand, we need to make sure that those systems are thoroughly tested and proven safe before they become widespread.
It's almost like we're going to need a whole new set of regulations for autonomous vehicles.
Exactly. And those regulations will need to address things like cybersecurity, data privacy, and liability in the event of an accident. It's a complex issue with a lot of moving parts.
It's fascinating to think about how this industry is constantly evolving and adapting.
It is.
So to wrap things up for our listener today, what are the key takeaways that you'd like to leave them with?
Well, first, I'd say that commercial vehicle operation in Ontario is governed by a comprehensive set of regulations designed to protect everyone on the road. We've seen how the CVOR system tracks carrier safety performance, the importance of understanding those size and weight limits, the role of inspections and ensuring compliance, and those critical aspects of vehicle maintenance and cargo securement.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
But it's clear that safety is paramount in this industry.
Absolutely. It's a shared responsibility, that requires diligence and attention to detail from everyone involved, drivers, operators, shippers, and even those of us who share the road with these massive vehicles.
And as technology advances, those regulations are going to need to keep pace to ensure that safety remains the top priority. This deep dive has been incredibly informative. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and with our listener today.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy the opportunity to shed light on the intricacies of this industry.
And to our listener, we hope you found this deep dive valuable. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going deep on something that might not sound super exciting right off the bat.
Yeah.
But I promise it's way more interesting than you might think. We're talking about commercial vehicle operation.
That's right. And we've got 3 really cool documents to help us unpack all the ins and outs of this world.
Yeah, these documents go into all sorts of things, like how to handle these massive vehicles on the road, fuel-saving secrets that honestly everyone can use.
Yeah, even if you've never driven anything bigger than a little compact car.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. Have you ever pictured yourself behind the wheel of one of those huge trucks?
Yeah.
Especially on a busy highway?
I think everyone's wondered that at some point, right?
It's got to be a whole different ball game than driving a regular car.
For sure. I mean, think about exiting the expressway safely. You're dealing with a vehicle that takes way longer to slow down.
Yeah, that's a great point. And speaking of expressways, our document, ff37.pdf, really highlights a few key things for exiting safely.
Like what?
Well, like signaling early for one.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense.
And using the exit lane to decelerate, not the expressway itself.
Right, right.
And of course, because of the truck's size and weight, I mean, they're massive. They have to maintain a much larger following distance than a regular car would.
Oh, absolutely. What might seem like a safe gap in your car could be way too close for comfort if you're behind a truck.
Totally.
Yeah.
The document also goes into navigating curves, which is something I never really thought about before. But it can be pretty tricky with a truck.
Yeah, there's this thing called off-tracking that can happen.
Off-tracking.
Yeah, basically it's when the rear wheels of the truck swing out wider than the cab when you're turning.
Ah.
It's a physics thing. And if other drivers aren't aware of it, things can get dicey pretty quickly.
So it's not just the truck driver who needs to be super careful. Everyone on the road needs to understand how these big vehicles move.
Exactly. Sharing the road safely means understanding the challenges everyone's facing.
Right. So we've got off-cracking, longer stopping distances. It sounds like anticipation is key for commercial drivers.
Absolutely. They have to be thinking several steps ahead, constantly predicting what other drivers might do and planning their moves accordingly.
Speaking of planning ahead, merging onto the expressway with a truck.
Yeah.
Got to be a whole other level of stress.
Oh, for sure. But our document, ff37.pdf, actually breaks down the merging process into a few key steps, and it all comes down to observation.
Observation?
Yeah, like before even thinking about merging, truck drivers have to really assess the traffic flow, identify safe gaps, make sure they have enough space to accelerate and merge smoothly.
So it's a constant mental calculation.
Pretty much. But it's important to remember that merging isn't about forcing your way in.
Right.
It's about finding a safe opportunity and smoothly integrating into the flow of traffic. which actually brings us to the whole concept of smooth driving in general.
Okay, so smooth driving. Why is that so important for commercial vehicles?
Well, I mean, think about it. These trucks are carrying tons of cargo.
Right.
Any sudden movements, jerky braking, or acceleration, it all puts extra stress on the vehicle and the cargo.
Makes sense. So FF38.pdf actually goes into a lot of detail about smooth driving techniques. What are some of the things that stood out to you?
Well, one thing that surprised me is that a lot of commercial vehicle turn signals aren't self-canceling.
Wait, really? So they have to manually turn them off every single time?
Yep. It's just another example of how much more awareness is required when you're driving one of these big rigs.
Wow, I never would have thought of that.
It's a whole different world behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle.
For sure. So we've talked about handling these massive trucks and the importance of smooth driving. What about fuel efficiency? I'm guessing that's a major concern for commercial vehicle operators.
Oh, absolutely. Fuel costs are a huge part of their operating expenses, and of course, there's the environmental impact to consider as well.
Right. And thankfully, our document, FF38.pdf, has a ton of great tips on how to maximize fuel efficiency. A lot of these tips are actually relevant for anyone, no matter what kind of car you drive.
Yeah, definitely.
So what are some of the key takeaways our listeners can apply to their own driving?
One of the simplest but most effective tips is to avoid unnecessary idling. You know, if you're going to be stopped for more than a minute or two, just turn off your engine. It can save a surprising amount of fuel.
Huh. So it's kind of like hitting the pause button on your gas consumption.
Exactly. And speaking of pausing, let's shift gears for a second and talk about that Check Your Green Smarts quiz in our FF39.pdf document.
Oh yeah, that looks fun. What were some of the things that surprised you in that quiz?
Well, one thing that a lot of people get wrong is that driving fast saves you time and fuel.
Really?
Yeah, but actually reducing your speed even just a little bit can have a big impact on your fuel consumption.
So slowing down actually helps you go further on a tank of gas.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
one of those driving myths that needs to be busted.
Interesting. What else?
Another big one is tire pressure. A lot of people don't realize that underinflated tires can actually decrease your fuel efficiency by up to 3%.
Wow. I had no idea it was that significant.
It is. So just by keeping your tires properly inflated, you can get a nice boost in fuel economy.
Easy enough. And FF38.pdf also talks about this technique called progressive shifting.
Oh, yeah.
I've never heard of that. What is it?
Basically, it involves shifting gears at lower RPMs.
Yep.
It's all about smoothness and finding that sweet spot where your engine is operating most efficiently.
So it's like finding the perfect rhythm in a dance.
Exactly. And speaking of rhythm, the document also talks about using cruise control strategically, which I know is a bit of a debate. Is cruise control really better for fuel efficiency?
That's a good question.
Well, it can be, especially on long highway stretches where you can maintain a consistent speed.
Right.
But there are times when it's not a good idea, like if you're driving in hilly or mountainous areas.
Yeah.
You need more control over your speed in those situations.
Makes sense. You don't want to be stuck crawling up a hill just because your cruise control is set too low.
Exactly. And speaking of hills, here's a tip that might surprise you. Letting gravity do the work on downhills can actually save you fuel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, experienced truck drivers use this technique all the time. Just ease off the accelerator and let the vehicle coast.
Huh. You'd be amazed how much fuel you can save by using gravity to your advantage. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Now, before we move on to our final document, I want to circle back to smooth driving for a second.
Okay.
FF38.pdf really emphasizes the importance of treating your vehicle with respect. What exactly do they mean by that?
It's all about being gentle with your car, like using the clutch and brake smoothly, avoiding sudden acceleration or braking, and even just being mindful of the road conditions.
So it's like a Zen approach to driving.
I like that.
Every action is deliberate and controlled. And it makes you think about how your driving habits affect not just your fuel efficiency, but the overall wear and tear on your car.
Exactly. And speaking of impact, let's dive into our final document and explore something that affects all drivers, especially those who are thinking about buying a used car. Vehicle branding.
Okay, vehicle branding. It sounds a little mysterious, but I have a feeling it's something everyone should know about, especially if you're in the market for a used car.
You're absolutely right. Ontario's mandatory vehicle branding program is all about transparency in the used vehicle market. It's designed to protect consumers by giving them clear information about a vehicle's history, particularly if it's been in a serious accident.
It's like a safety net for used car buyers.
Exactly. It helps people make informed decisions and avoid any nasty surprises down the road.
Okay, so let's break down these 4 brands. We got none, which we know doesn't necessarily mean a clean history.
Right.
And then there's irreparable, which basically means the car is only good for parts.
Yep.
What about the other two? Salvage and rebuilt. What's the difference?
So salvage means the vehicle has been damaged to the point where it's been written off by an insurance company, but it could potentially be repaired.
Okay.
The catch is it can't be driven on the roads until it passes a very thorough inspection and is deemed roadworthy.
So it's like a second chance for a car.
You could say that. And if a salvage vehicle passes inspection, it gets the rebuilt brand, which means it's been repaired to meet safety standards and is good to go.
Okay, that makes sense. So for anyone listening who's thinking about buying a used car, checking the vehicle's branding history is super important.
Absolutely. It's a simple step that can give you really valuable insights and help you avoid potential headaches down the line. And this information is readily available on the vehicle permit, vehicle abstracts, and the used vehicle information package.
Okay, so no more excuses for buying a used car without doing your research. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the challenges of handling massive treks to the zen art of smooth driving and the importance of fuel efficiency.
And we even demystified vehicle branding so our listeners can navigate the used car market with confidence.
Exactly. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that smooth, efficient driving isn't just good for the environment and our wallets.
Right.
It also makes us more aware and considerate drivers, no matter what kind of vehicle we're driving.
I couldn't agree more. It's about being mindful of our actions and how they impact the road, the environment, and the people around us.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. A huge thanks to our source documents for guiding our exploration today.
And to you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, keep those wheels turning smoothly. So we were talking about handling those big rigs and how important smooth driving is for them.
Right.
But what about fuel efficiency? I mean, I got to imagine that's a big concern for commercial vehicle operators.
Oh, absolutely. Fuel costs are a huge chunk of their operating expenses. Plus, there's the whole environmental impact to think about, too.
For sure. And it's great that our document, ff38.pdf, has all these tips on how to save fuel.
Yeah, tons of great stuff in there.
And a lot of it applies to, like, everyone, not just truck drivers.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are some of the things that stood out to you? Like, what could our listeners actually use in their own driving?
Well, one of the easiest things, and this might seem obvious, but it's amazing how many people don't do it, is avoiding unnecessary idling.
Oh, right.
If you're going to be stopped for more than like a minute or two, just turn off your engine.
Yeah, makes sense.
It might not seem like much, but it can really add up over time.
It's like hitting the pause button on your gas usage.
Exactly. And speaking of pausing, let's talk about that Check Your Green Smarts quiz in our other document, ff39.pdf.
Oh, yeah, that looks fun. What were some of the things in there that surprised you?
Well, one thing that a lot of people think is that driving fast actually saves you time and fuel. But in reality, slowing down even a little bit can make a big difference in your fuel consumption.
So like easing off the gas pedal can actually help you go further on a tank.
Exactly. It's one of those driving myths that needs to be debunked.
That's so counterintuitive.
Oh, yes. Another big one is tire pressure. A lot of people don't realize that underinflated tires can actually reduce your fuel efficiency by as much as 3%.
Wow. I had no idea it was that much.
It is.
Yeah.
So just by making sure your tires are properly inflated, you can get a nice little improvement in your mileage.
That's an easy fix. I like it. Any other cool tips?
Oh, yeah. ff38.pdf mentions this technique called progressive shifting.
Progressive shifting. I've never heard of that.
It's basically shifting gears at lower RPMs.
Yeah.
So it's all about being smooth and finding that sweet spot where your engine's running most efficiently.
So like finding the right rhythm when you're driving.
Exactly. And speaking of rhythm, the document also talks about using cruise control strategically.
Oh, yeah, cruise control.
Yeah.
That's always a debate. Is it really better for fuel efficiency?
Well, it can be, especially on long highway stretches where you can maintain a consistent speed.
Right.
But there are times when it's not such a good idea. Like when you're driving in hilly or mountainous areas, you need more control over your speed in those situations.
Right. You don't want to be like crawling up a hill just because your cruise control set too low.
Exactly. And speaking of hills, here's a tip that a lot of people might not know. Letting gravity do the work on downhills can save you fuel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of experienced truck drivers use this technique. You just ease off the gas and let the vehicle coast.
So you just kind of ride the wave.
Pretty much.
Huh.
And you'd be amazed how much fuel you can save just by letting gravity do its thing.
That's a cool trick.
Okay.
Okay, so before we move on to our final document, I want to circle back to smooth driving for a second.
Okay.
ff38.pdf talks a lot about treating your vehicle with respect. What do they mean by that?
Basically just being gentle with your car. Using the clutch and brake smoothly, avoiding any sudden movements, and even just being aware of the road conditions.
So it's like a Zen approach to driving.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
about being deliberate and controlled with every action. And it really makes you think about how your driving habits affect not just your fuel efficiency, but also the overall wear and tear on your car.
Totally. It's
Yeah,
about being mindful of your impact on your vehicle and the environment.
exactly. And speaking of impact, let's dive into our last document and talk about something that affects all drivers, especially if you're thinking about buying a used car vehicle branding.
Hmm.
So we were talking about vehicle branding and how it's this kind of safety net for used car buyers.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about transparency in the market, making sure people have the information they need to make good decisions.
Right. So we were going over the 4 different brands. We talked about none, which doesn't necessarily mean a clean history,
Hmm.
and irreparable, which means the car is basically totaled.
Right. Parts only on that one.
Exactly. So what are the other two, salvage and rebuilt? What makes them different?
Okay, so salvage means a vehicle's been damaged pretty badly, like to the point where an insurance company's written it off,
Okay.
but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a goner. It could potentially be repaired.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but there's a catch. It can't be driven on the roads until it goes through a very strict inspection process and is officially declared roadworthy.
So it's like a second chance for a car.
That's a good way to put it.
No.
And if that salvage vehicle passes all the inspections and everything, then it gets the rebuilt brand.
Which means it's good to go.
Exactly. It means it's been repaired to meet all the safety standards and is safe to drive.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, anyone out there who's thinking about buying a used car, do your homework. Check that vehicle's branding history.
Absolutely. It's such a simple step, but it can give you so much valuable information and potentially save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Totally. So where can people find this information?
It's actually pretty easy to access. It's on the vehicle, permit vehicle abstracts, and the used vehicle information package.
So no excuses.
Yeah.
People need to know what they're getting into before they buy a used car.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground today, from maneuvering these massive trucks to the whole philosophy of smooth driving and the ins and outs of fuel efficiency.
We even dove into vehicle branding and gave our listeners the tools to navigate the used car market safely.
I think one of the coolest things I learned today is that smooth, efficient driving isn't just good for the planet and our wallets. It actually makes us better drivers overall.
Absolutely. It's all about being more aware and considerate of our surroundings, no matter what kind of vehicle we're behind the wheel of.
That's a great point. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive for today.
I think so.
A huge thanks to our source documents for guiding us through all this information.
And of course, thanks to all of you for listening and joining us on this journey.
We'll see you next time. Until then, drive safe and keep those wheels turning smoothly. Hey everyone, and welcome back. You ever just look at your driver's license and wonder what all those different classes actually mean?
Yeah, for sure. It's like a secret code.
Right, like ADFG. It's alphabet soup. But the soup determines what you can and can't drive.
Exactly. And today we're going to crack the code.
We're going deep into Ontario's driver's license classes,
Yeah.
using excerpts from the official Ministry of Transportation Truck Handbook.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be looking at everything from those familiar cars and vans to the massive trucks you see on the highway.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure, but for driving.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's start with the basics, the classes most of us encounter every day.
Okay, so the foundation, the starting point for most drivers is Class G.
Right.
This is your all-access pass to the world of personal vehicles. Cars, vans, small trucks.
Okay, so Class G is your everyday driver's license. But what if you're dreaming of something a bit bigger, like a school bus full of kids?
Ah, now you're talking about a whole different level of responsibility. To handle a bus full of passengers, you'd need a Class F license. That's a big step up. It's like leveling up in a driving game, right? You start with a basic car, then maybe graduate to a minivan, and finally unlock the school bus, or even a big rig down the line.
I like that analogy. And just like in those games, Ontario has a graduated licensing system to help new drivers gradually gain experience and skills.
Right, we've all been there, the G1, the G2, those nighttime driving restrictions.
Exactly. It's all about easing new drivers into the complexities of the road. And it looks like they have a similar system for motorcycles with the M1 and M2 licenses.
Yeah, I remember those. And what's interesting is that M2 license has a zero tolerance policy for alcohol.
No exceptions.
Okay.
I think that really highlights how seriously Ontario takes motorcycle safety, especially for newer riders.
Motorcycles are inherently riskier, so yeah, any measures to increase safety, especially early on, are crucial. The handbook also mentions an L condition and an M condition for motorcycle licenses, but it doesn't really explain what they are.
Those conditions restrict you to specific types of motorcycles.
So, like, what kind of restrictions are we talking about?
Well, for example, the L condition might limit you to lower-powered motorcycles or scooters.
Okay, that makes sense.
Start small.
Work your way up.
Exactly. And then the M condition might restrict you to three-wheeled motorcycles. It's all about ensuring riders progressively develop their skills before hopping on more powerful or complex machines.
So even within a single license class, there are these subcategories that fine-tune what you're allowed to drive based on your experience and the vehicle's capabilities.
Precisely. It's a layered system designed to match drivers with vehicles appropriately ensuring safety for everyone on the road.
Okay, so we've covered those basic classes, but there's one more letter that jumps out at me in the handbook, the Z endorsement. What's that all about?
Ah, the Z endorsement.
Yeah.
That's essential for anyone operating vehicles equipped with air brake systems.
Air brakes. That sounds pretty heavy duty.
It is. Typically, you're talking about larger trucks and buses. Those vehicles are in a whole different weight class.
Yeah, I can only imagine the stopping power you need for one of those things must be incredible.
Exactly. Air brakes work differently than standard hydraulic brakes. They're more complex and require specialized training to operate safely.
So it's not just about knowing how to drive, it's about understanding the specific systems that control those massive vehicles.
Right. A lack of understanding of air brake systems could have disastrous consequences.
Okay, now you're making me nervous about those big trucks.
But hey, that's why we have these licenses and endorsements, to make sure that only qualified drivers are handling those powerful machines.
That makes sense. So the Z endorsement is like a badge of honor. It shows you've got the skills to handle the big stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a sign that you've gone the extra mile to understand the complexities of air brake systems and that you're committed to operating those vehicles safely.
All right, so we've got a good handle on the different classes, but the handbook also throws a bunch of technical definitions at us. Gross weight, registered gross weight. It's enough to make your head spin.
Yeah, those definitions might seem like technical jargon at first, but they have real-world implications for safety, legality, even the cost of operating a vehicle.
Okay, so let's break them down, starting with gross weight. What does that even mean?
Gross weight refers to the total weight of the vehicle and everything. It's carrying passengers, cargo, even that spare tire in the trunk. It's everything.
So it's like the all-inclusive weight of the vehicle.
Exactly. And then you have registered gross weight, which is the maximum weight your vehicle is legally allowed to weigh.
Ah, so that's based on your vehicle's registration and any permits you might have?
Right. It's like a weight budget for your vehicle. You're paying for the right to haul a certain amount, and going over that limit can have serious consequences.
Yeah, consequences like what? Hefty fines.
For sure. But more importantly, exceeding your vehicle's weight limits puts a huge strain on its components. Tires, brake suspension, which increases the risk of mechanical failure and potentially a serious accident.
So it's not just about avoiding a ticket. It's about understanding those weight limits are there for a reason, to protect you, your vehicle, and everyone else on the road.
Exactly. And there's another important weight definition we need to talk about, MGVWR, or Manufacturer's Gross Vehicle Weight Rating.
Okay, another acronym. Hit me with it.
This number set by the vehicle's manufacturer tells you the absolute maximum weight it can handle safely.
So that's like the ultimate weight limit, the red line you absolutely cannot cross no matter what.
Exactly. It's based on the structural strength of the vehicle, the capacity of its brakes and suspension, all sorts of factors that determine how much weight it can handle without risking catastrophic failure.
Got it. So you're telling me buying a vehicle isn't just about picking the color you like. It's about understanding these weight limits and how they impact what you can realistically do with that vehicle.
Absolutely. These considerations become even more critical when we step into the world of heavy-duty trucking, the realm of the A&D licenses.
We'll definitely be getting into those in a bit. But before we do that, there are a couple more definitions I want to unpack. Motor vehicle versus just plain vehicle. And then there's that whole trailer situation.
Yeah, those might seem like legal nitpicking, but they actually have important implications for how the rules of the road are applied.
Okay, color me intrigued. Let's dive into those definitions after a quick break.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, so before we get into those A&D licenses, we were talking about those other definitions, motor vehicle versus just plain vehicle. And then there's trailer, too. It seems like they're all the same thing, but I'm guessing there are some subtle differences.
Yeah, those little details matter, especially when it comes to the law.
Okay, so help me out here. What's the difference between a motor vehicle and a vehicle?
Think of it like this motor vehicle is anything with an engine. So your car, truck, motorcycle, even that little electric scooter your neighbor zips around on, those are all motor vehicles.
Okay, that makes sense. So is vehicle just like a bigger category?
Exactly. It includes all those things with engines, plus anything else that moves people or things.
Yeah.
So bicycles, horse-drawn carriages, even those futuristic electric skateboards.
Ah, so it's like a broader term that covers all modes of transportation.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And that distinction is important because different rules and regulations might apply depending on whether something is classified as a motor vehicle or just a vehicle.
Okay, I could see how that could get tricky, especially with all the new types of transportation popping up these days.
Right. It's all about making sure the law can adapt to those changes. And then there's the whole trailer thing.
Yeah, that one always confused me. It's attached to the vehicle, so why is it considered separate?
Well, legally speaking, a trailer is its own vehicle.
Yeah.
Even though it's being towed by another vehicle.
So it's like a vehicle within a vehicle.
In a way. And that distinction has some important implications. For example, you need to register and insure your trailer separately from your towing vehicle.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want someone towing a massive uninsured trailer and causing an accident without any liability coverage.
Exactly. And there might be different traffic laws that apply to the trailer versus the towing vehicle.
Interesting. So it's not just about hitching up your boat and hitting the open road. There's a whole set of legal and safety considerations specific to trailers that drivers need to be aware of.
Absolutely.
Hey.
And all these definitions, they highlight how important it is to really understand the language of the road. It's not just about passing a test, it's about being a responsible driver.
Right. It's about recognizing those words in the handbook aren't just abstract concepts. They represent real vehicles, real people, and real situations where a lack of understanding could have serious consequences.
Well said. And speaking of real vehicles, let's circle back to that self-propelled implement of husbandry definition. We kind of glossed over that one earlier.
Yeah, I'm so curious about that one. It seems a bit out of place in a driver's license handbook. Most people don't think of tractors and combines when they think of driving.
It's all about recognizing the unique driving landscape of Ontario, especially in rural areas where you're more likely to encounter farm vehicles on public roads.
Right. You don't see too many tractors cruising down city streets.
Exactly. And while you might not need a standard driver's license to operate a self-propelled implement of husbandry on private property, things change when they venture onto public roads.
So it's about making sure those drivers are following the rules of the road and that other drivers know how to share the road safely with them.
Exactly. They might move slower, have limited visibility, or make wide turns that require extra space and patience from other drivers. It's crucial for everyone to understand the unique characteristics of these vehicles and adjust their driving accordingly.
You know, it's amazing how this deep dive into driver's licenses is revealing all these interconnected aspects of road safety. It's not just about knowing how to operate your own vehicle. It's about understanding the rules, the different vehicle types, and the shared responsibility we all have for creating a safe environment for everyone.
Absolutely. It's like a complex dance with all these different players moving together in a coordinated way. And the music. That's the rules of the road, the license classifications, the vehicle definitions, and the understanding we bring to our role as drivers.
Okay, so we've explored the world of definitions and those everyday license classes. Now let's shift gears and head into the realm of heavy-duty trucking. Are you ready to unpack the A&D licenses?
Absolutely. Let's delve into the world of professional trucking and explore what it takes to handle those powerful machines that keep our economy moving.
Okay, so we're finally here, the A&D licenses, the big leagues of driving.
That's right. These are the licenses that let you handle those massive trucks you see on the highway, hauling everything from cars to construction equipment.
It's a whole different world out there when you're behind the wheel of one of those rigs.
It is. It demands a whole other level of skill and responsibility.
We've already talked about some of the key differences between the classes, like the weight restrictions for towing.
Right.
But I'm curious, what really sets a Class A driver apart from a Class D driver?
Picture this. You're driving down the highway, and you see one of those massive tractor trailers hauling two full-length trailers behind it. That's a Class A driver in action.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility.
It is. They're trained to handle any combination of vehicles where the total towed weight is over 4,600 kilograms.
That's incredible. So Class A drivers are basically the kings and queens of the road.
I'd say so. They need a deep understanding of weight distribution braking distances and the impact those massive vehicles have on other drivers.
It's not something you just pick up overnight.
Definitely not. It takes a lot of training and experience to become a skilled Class A driver.
So what about Class D drivers? Where do they fit in?
They're also essential to the flow of goods and services. They handled those vehicles, towing heavier trailers, but they had to stay under that 4,600 kilogram limit.
So, like, what kind of vehicles are we talking about here?
Think of those box trucks making deliveries or dump trucks hauling construction materials. They might not be as visually imposing as those tractor trailers, but they're just as important.
So it's like different weight classes in boxing.
Yeah, I like that analogy. You've got your heavyweights and your middleweights, each with their own set of skills and challenges.
So how do you actually get one of these licenses? Is it the same process as getting a regular car license?
Well, there are two pathways. The traditional route is through a drive test center. Written tests, road tests, all that.
Yeah, the good old-fashioned way.
Right. But there's also an alternative route through what's called a recognized authority.
What's that?
It's basically a program or a course offered by an employer or a community college that's been approved by the Ministry of Transportation.
So it's like a more specialized training program specifically for truck drivers.
Exactly. It's designed to make sure those drivers have the skills and knowledge they need to operate those vehicles safely and effectively.
That makes sense. And it looks like even if you're just learning to drive a truck, you still need to have someone with experience in the passenger seat.
That's right. If you have a regular G license and you're practicing to drive a truck, you need to be accompanied by someone who already has a Class D or A license.
So it's like having a mentor guiding you through the process.
Exactly. They can provide valuable insights and help you develop those essential skills.
It's amazing how much thought and detail has gone into Ontario's driver's licensing system. It's like a carefully crafted puzzle where every piece fits together to create a framework for safe and responsible driving.
I agree. It's all about making sure the right people are behind the wheel of the right vehicles, and that everyone on the road is aware of the rules and responsibilities that come with driving.
It's a reminder that driving isn't just a privilege, it's a responsibility.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from those basic car licenses all the way up to those massive tractor trailers.
We've decoded the alphabet soup of driver's license classes.
Exactly. And I hope our listeners now have a better understanding of what those letters and numbers really mean.
It's not just about memorizing information. It's about using that knowledge to make informed decisions behind the wheel.
And to appreciate the complexity and importance of driver training and licensing.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. But as always, we encourage you to keep on learning, keep on exploring, and keep on driving safely. Safe travels, everyone.
And until next time, keep on diving deep. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into commercial vehicle safety regs.
Ooh.
Specifically here in Ontario.
All right.
We're going to be looking at some excerpts from Ontario's Commercial Vehicle Handbook as our guide.
Sounds good.
Get ready for some surprises. You might not expect some of these.
It's not just about the rules and the regs, though. It's about understanding why those rules and regs are there.
Yeah.
It's about protecting everybody on the road, including the drivers.
Okay, so let's jump into this. First up, we got frequent cargo checks.
Right.
So it's not just load it up and go.
Yeah.
Drivers are actually required to re-inspect their cargo and their securement systems every 3 hours of driving.
Okay.
Or every 240 kilometers.
Okay.
Whichever comes first.
Makes sense.
And they also need to do it every time the driver changes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's because things can shift during transit, especially at highway speeds. Imagine a load of lumber coming loose on the 401 behind you.
Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
Not a pretty picture.
There's so many dashcam videos online that, highlight just how important those checks are.
Right.
I guess it's fresh eyes on the situation every time you get back in.
Every time.
Making sure everything's still good.
Absolutely.
Now, are these, cargo securement rules just an Ontario thing?
Good question.
Or is it consistent across Canada?
Well, Ontario follows the national standard, which is the National Safety Code Standard 10 for cargo securement.
Right.
And that's developed by the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators.
Oh, okay.
So no matter where that truck's going in Canada,
right,
you can be sure that that cargo's secured to that standard.
That's good. That's reassuring to know. So it's all about, creating a safer transportation system for everyone.
It is.
Cargo securement is just one piece of the puzzle, though, right?
It is.
What about the vehicles themselves?
Well, let's talk about annual inspections then.
Okay.
These are much more than just a formality to get a sticker on your windshield.
Yeah.
So every commercial vehicle and trailer every year undergoes an inspection by a licensed mechanic.
What are they looking for during these inspections?
Well, they're checking to make sure that the vehicle meets the standards that are set out by the National Safety Code Standard 11, Part B.
Right.
This covers everything from brakes and steering to lights and tires, the whole 9 yards.
It's like giving your truck a yearly physical
Exactly.
to catch any problems.
Yeah.
You know, we see those inspection stickers all the time.
Right.
But I never really thought about, like, what goes into getting one.
It's quite a process.
Okay.
And if you are interested in, like, really looking into the details of this, you can find the full NSC Standard 11 on the CCMTA website.
Okay, cool. We'll be sure to include that link for our listeners. But even with those yearly inspections, the driver still has a big responsibility, right?
Absolutely. Daily vehicle inspections are not just a good idea.
Right.
They're the law.
Okay.
So even if you have that shiny inspection sticker, you just can't assume everything's okay.
So they're literally, like, walking around the vehicle, checking everything.
Yeah, it's called a circle check.
Oh, circle check.
Or a pre-trip inspection.
Okay.
And these happen every 24 hours.
Okay.
Plus, drivers need to monitor the condition of the vehicle throughout their trip.
It's all about being proactive.
Yeah.
Addressing any issues before they become big problems.
For sure, because think about it. You're driving a huge vehicle.
Right.
You need to be confident that it's safe to operate.
Yeah.
Not just for yourself, but for everybody else you're sharing the road with.
Yeah, I remember seeing a news report about a truck losing a wheel on the highway because of a loose lug nut.
Oof.
So, like, these things, they happen.
They do.
So drivers are required to document what they find.
Yes.
During these inspections.
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, that's where the inspection report comes in.
Okay.
There's a specific inspection schedule that they follow.
Right.
That categorizes defects as either major or minor.
Okay, so a major defect would be something serious.
Yes.
Like a brake issue.
Yes.
Or a problem with the cargo securement.
Yes.
Something that makes the vehicle unsafe to drive.
Exactly. A major defect means the vehicle can't be on the road until it's repaired.
Yeah, okay.
A minor defect, on the other hand, is something that needs to be reported to the operator, but the vehicle can still be driven, like a broken mirror or a light that's out.
Gotcha. So it's a system for catching problems early. And making sure they're addressed, whether they're big or small.
Exactly.
And drivers have to keep records of these inspections.
They do. They need to carry both the inspection report and the schedule to prove they've done their due diligence.
Okay.
And these days, everything can be electronic.
Oh, that's nice.
So no need for that big binder.
Yeah, no more giant binders.
Exactly.
Now, are we just scratching the surface here?
Well,
of the whole inspection process?
No.
Is there more that our listeners should know about?
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
For a deeper dive into the full inspection process, I would recommend looking at Module 8 of the Trucks and Buses Commercial Vehicle Operators Safety Manual.
Okay.
It's an excellent resource.
Fantastic. And we'll include a link to that as well.
Yeah, perfect.
Now, what happens if a driver finds a safety defect?
Right.
Either during an inspection or, you know, when they're out on the road.
Yeah.
Do they just, like, report it to their dispatcher?
Well, reporting is absolutely crucial.
Go ahead.
Drivers are required to report any defect to the operator as soon as possible, especially if it's a major defect. We're talking about prioritizing safety above all else.
And major defects require immediate repair. Right?
No exceptions.
No exceptions when it comes to safety.
Now, if a vehicle's found to have serious infractions, things can get pretty serious.
I can.
The vehicle can be taken out of service.
Yes.
Meaning it's not allowed back on the road.
Correct.
Until those problems are fixed.
That's right.
So we're talking about things like broken lights.
Yep.
Insecure loads.
Yes.
Faulty brakes. Anything that compromises safety.
Absolutely. Anything that compromises safety.
I've heard that air brake issues are a common reason for vehicles being taken out of service.
It is.
Why is that?
Well, air brakes play a vital role
right.
in stopping heavy vehicles safely.
Yes.
And out-of-adjustment air brakes are a major hazard.
Okay.
Neglecting their maintenance can lead to accidents.
Oh, wow.
Vehicle detention.
Right.
And even problems with the operator's CVOR certificate.
CVOR?
Yeah.
What is that? The CVOR, or Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration.
Okay.
It's like a safety report card for trucking companies here in Ontario.
Right.
It's a points-based system where operators accumulate points for safety violations,
okay,
collisions,
right,
and even the results of roadside inspections.
Oh, wow.
Too many points can lead to warnings, fines, audits, and even suspension or cancellation of their CVOR certificate.
That's serious.
It is.
So it sounds like a powerful incentive for operators to prioritize safety.
It is.
Make sure that their vehicles are in top shape.
Absolutely. It's all about accountability and creating that culture of safety within the industry.
Okay, so let's get back to air brakes for a moment.
Okay.
You mentioned that drivers can't just adjust their own air brakes unless they have specific training.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
It might seem like a simple task, but air brake adjustment requires specialized knowledge.
Okay.
Think of it like performing surgery on someone. You wouldn't want someone without the proper training and operating on you,
That's a good point.
So to adjust air brakes, you either need to have completed an approved air brake adjustment course or be a certified mechanic.
Okay, it's not something to mess around with unless you know what you're doing.
No.
Air brakes are complex systems.
They are.
And improper adjustment can have serious consequences.
For sure.
Now, Ontario has a dedicated handbook for air brakes, right?
We do. It's called the Official MTO Air Brake Handbook.
Okay, the Official MTO Air Brake Handbook.
Yep.
Perfect. So before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to recap what a typical daily inspection checklist includes.
Okay.
We've touched on a few things already.
Yes.
But it sounds like there's a lot to cover.
There is.
So what are some of the things that a driver would be checking?
Okay. Well, it's a comprehensive check from top to bottom, inside and out.
Okay.
We're talking air brake systems, the cab, cargo securement, coupling devices if the vehicle has them, and even dangerous goods if the driver's qualified for that.
Wow. And that's not even all of it.
No.
So driver controls, driver's seat, electric brake system, emergency equipment, safety devices, exhaust system, frame and cargo body, fuel system, glass and mirrors.
That's right.
It's a long list.
It is a long list. It's a true circle check.
Yeah, a true circle check.
Yeah.
But remember, listener, this is just a starting point.
It is.
For the full details.
Yeah.
And the specific requirements for each item. Be sure to check out the resources that we've mentioned.
Absolutely.
They'll give you the complete picture.
They will.
Of what's involved in keeping commercial vehicles safe on our roads.
I will.
Okay, so we're back, and we're continuing our deep dives into commercial vehicle safety here in Ontario.
Yeah, it's amazing what we've learned already about all these intricate systems that are in place to make sure that these big rigs are operating safely.
It really highlights the complexity
Absolutely.
of commercial vehicle safety and how much effort goes into it.
Yeah.
It's not just about, you know,
checking boxes
and following rules blindly. It's about understanding the why behind those rules.
Oh, absolutely.
And fostering a culture of safety within the industry.
It's all about safety.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What else should our listeners know about these inspections and the overall approach to commercial vehicle safety in Ontario?
Well, let's shift our focus to what happens after an inspection.
What
if a driver finds a defect?
Okay.
Whether it's during their daily check or even while they're out on the road.
What are the next steps?
Well, I imagine any defect, no matter how small, could potentially turn into a bigger problem down the line.
Absolutely.
So I'm guessing there's a specific protocol for reporting these issues.
Exactly.
We're absolutely right. Drivers are required to report any defects to the operator as soon as possible.
Okay.
And if it's a major defect, well, that triggers immediate action. Remember, a major defect means the vehicle is considered unsafe to operate and is taken out of service until that problem is fixed.
So there's no wiggle room when it comes to major defects.
Safety comes first.
Safety first.
And we're not just talking about hypothetical scenarios here. These situations happen all the time. Think about things like broken lights, insecure loads, faulty brakes. Any issue that could compromise the safety of the vehicle and everyone else on the road.
And you mentioned earlier that out-of-adjustment air brakes are a common reason for vehicles being taken out of service.
They are.
I could see why that would be a major concern.
Absolutely. Air brakes are critical for stopping those heavy vehicles. And neglecting their maintenance is simply not an option. It's a huge risk, not only to the driver, but to everyone else sharing the road.
And the consequences for neglecting these regulations go beyond safety too.
You're exactly right. We're not just talking about a slap on the wrist here. There can be serious repercussions, including vehicle detention fines, and even potential impacts on the operator's CVOR certificate.
So let's unpack that a bit more. We touched on CVOR earlier. but I think it's worth revisiting because it seems like a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal.
Okay.
The Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration Program, or CVOR for short, is essentially a system for monitoring and evaluating the safety performance of trucking companies here in Ontario. It's how the Ministry of Transportation keeps tabs on how well operators are managing their safety responsibilities.
So it's not just about the vehicles themselves. It's about the entire operation.
Precisely. It takes a holistic approach, considering everything from the company's safety policies and procedures to their driver training programs and vehicle maintenance practices. It's about creating a culture of safety that permeates every aspect of the operation.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So how does CVOR actually work? Is there like a scorecard or a rating system?
There is. It's a points-based system. Operators start with a clean slate, but they can accumulate points for various things, such as convictions for safety violations, collisions they're involved in, and even the results of those roadside inspections we talked about earlier.
So the more points you have, the worse your safety record.
Exactly. And the Ministry of Transportation takes those points very seriously. If an operator accumulates too many points, they face a range of consequences, including warnings, fines,
audits, and even the potential for their CVOR certificate to be suspended or revoked.
That's a pretty strong incentive for operators to stay on top of their safety game.
It is. It's all about accountability. And ensuring that everyone involved in the operation of commercial vehicles is doing their part to maintain those high safety standards. It's about protecting everyone on the road.
Now, how does an operator actually get a CVOR certificate in the first place? Is it a complicated process?
Well, there's an application process, of course. But it's more than just filling out a form and paying a fee. Operators need to provide detailed information about their business, their vehicles, their drivers, and their overall safety management practices.
So it's a thorough vetting process.
It is.
To ensure that they're ready to meet those requirements.
Exactly. It's about setting the bar high from the outset.
And once they have their CVOR certificate, operators need to continuously demonstrate their commitment to safety to maintain their good stand-in. It's an ongoing responsibility.
It sounds like a very comprehensive system.
It is.
I can see why it's so crucial for ensuring the safety
of
everyone on the road.
It is.
It's fascinating how all these different pieces fit together.
Right.
The cargo securement standards, the annual inspections, the daily inspections, and now this CVOR program.
You've hit the nail on the head. They're all interconnected pieces of a larger puzzle working together to create this robust safety system. And what's important to remember is that it's a system that ultimately benefits everyone, from the drivers and operators to the general public.
It's like a chain reaction. Where each element reinforces the next, creating a ripple effect of safety.
That's a great way to put it.
Throughout the entire industry.
Yeah, it's about creating a collective awareness and a shared responsibility for safety.
Have you ever heard of the Commercial Vehicle Operator Safety Manual?
I have, yes.
Okay, what is that?
Well, it's a treasure trove of information. It's a comprehensive guide that covers a wide range of safety-related topics for commercial vehicle operators here in Ontario. It's packed with information on everything from driver training and qualifications to vehicle inspections and maintenance practices.
Wow, it sounds like a really great resource.
It is, and the best part is that it's available online.
Oh, wow.
Completely free of charge.
Fantastic. We'll include a link to that in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to a question I posed earlier. Imagine you're walking around Big Rig, about to conduct an inspection. What are some key things that you would be looking for? What signs would give you confidence in the vehicle's safety?
Okay, let me put on my inspector's hat here. First things first. I'd make a beeline for those tires. They are the foundation of the vehicle. Literally keeping it rolling. So they need to be in top condition.
For sure.
So I'd be looking for any signs of wear and tear, making sure they're properly inflated, and checking the overall condition of the wheels and rims.
Excellent point. Tire condition is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Remember, we're talking about heavy vehicles here.
Wait.
So even a small tire problem can have major consequences.
Absolutely. Okay, after the tires, I'd move on to the brakes.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about air brakes already.
Yes.
But I'd want to make sure that they're functioning perfectly. So listening for any unusual noises, looking for any leaks or signs of wear and tear.
You're on a roll. And let's not forget about those lights.
Oh, yes, the lights.
Headlights, taillights, brake lights, turn signals. They all need to be working correctly.
Right.
To ensure visibility and communication on the road.
Right.
Especially at night or in bad weather.
Oh, I can't imagine how dangerous it would be.
Right.
To be driving behind a truck with faulty brake lights at night.
It's scary.
So scary.
Yeah.
Okay, after the lights, it's time to check the cargo securement.
Yes, cargo securement, it's worth reiterating just how important this is.
Yes.
The cargo needs to be locked down tight.
Right.
To prevent it from shifting or spilling during transport.
Yeah.
Which could create a hazardous situation for everyone on the road.
So no loose straps or anything like that?
No loose straps, no.
It all needs to be in tip-top shape.
Everything needs to be tight, secure, and in full compliance with those national safety code standards we talked about earlier.
No compromises.
No compromises when it comes to cargo securement.
Now, beyond those specific components,
Okay.
I'd also be paying attention to the overall condition of the vehicle.
Yes.
Does it look well maintained?
Yeah.
Are there any obvious signs of damage or neglect?
Right.
Those would definitely raise red flags for me.
That's a keen observation.
Yeah.
A well-maintained vehicle is generally a safer vehicle.
Yeah.
If a truck looks like it's been neglected or hasn't seen a mechanic in years, that's a major cause for concern.
Yeah.
It's a sign that maybe the operator might not be taking safety as seriously as they should be.
Okay, speaking of operators, what about the driver?
Right.
I want to observe their behavior as well.
Okay.
Make sure they seem alert, professional, and are following the rules of the road.
Those are all important factors to consider.
Yeah.
A driver's behavior can provide insight into their overall approach to safety.
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely.
You could have a truck that looks perfectly maintained.
Right.
But if the driver's not behaving responsibly,
exactly,
that's a major cause for concern.
It is a major cause for concern.
So you can see there's a lot to consider.
There is.
When evaluating the safety of a commercial vehicle.
Right.
It's not just about checking items off a list.
It's not.
It's about looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly.
And using your judgment.
That's where knowledge and awareness come in handy. The more we understand about these regulations and the factors that contribute to safety, the better equipped we are to make those informed observations and decisions.
Exactly. So even though we're not professional inspectors, we can all play a role in promoting safety on the road.
Absolutely.
If we see something that seems unsafe, we can report it.
Exactly. It's about being vigilant
and
looking out for each other.
Yeah.
We all have that shared responsibility.
Absolutely. A shared responsibility for safety.
Now, as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I want to emphasize that safety is a journey, not a destination. It's an ongoing process of learning, improvement, and adaptation.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into commercial vehicle safety regs in Ontario.
It's been quite a journey.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Yeah, me too.
About the,
the intricate web.
The intricate web of rules.
Oh, yeah.
And responsibilities that keep those big trucks rolling safely.
And one of the key takeaways for me is the emphasis on shared responsibility.
Right.
It's not just on the drivers or the operators.
Right.
It's a collective effort involving everyone on the road.
Absolutely. We all have a role to play.
Yeah.
In promoting safety, and it starts with awareness.
Yes.
And you mentioned that even if we're not professional inspectors, we can still be observant and report any safety concerns that we might notice.
You don't need a mechanic certification to spot a truck with a missing mud flap or a load that looks precariously balanced if something seems off. It's always better to err on the side of caution and report it.
So let's say you're driving behind a commercial vehicle and something catches your eye.
Okay.
Maybe it's a flicker in taillight or a tire that looks a little low.
Yeah.
What's the best way to report that?
Well, here in Ontario, you can contact the Ministry of Transportation directly through their website.
Okay.
Or by calling their toll-free number.
Okay.
They have a dedicated team that handles these types of reports and will investigate any potential safety concerns.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people hesitate to report these things because they don't want to be a bother or they're not sure if it's a big deal.
I know.
But, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Absolutely. It's all about creating that culture of safety.
Right.
Where everyone feels empowered to speak up. If they see something that doesn't look right, you could potentially be saving lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
By reporting a safety hazard.
One of the things that's been fascinating to me throughout this whole deep dive is the level of detail and thought that's gone into these regulations.
Yeah.
It's clear that safety is paramount.
Absolutely.
In the commercial vehicle industry.
It has to be. These vehicles share the road with everyone else.
Right.
And their sheer size and weight makes safety an absolute priority.
Right.
Remember we talked about the CVOR program?
Yeah.
And how it holds operators accountable for their safety performance?
Right.
That's just one example of the measures in place to ensure that commercial vehicles are operating safely and responsibly.
Now, speaking of the CVOR program, I'm curious about something.
Okay.
Do you think there are any potential downsides or drawbacks to such a stringent safety system?
Right.
Like, could it be overly burdensome for operators?
That's a valid question. And like any complex system, there are bound to be some challenges, some areas for improvement.
Yeah.
Some operators might argue that certain regulations are too strict or that the points-based system can be unfair in certain situations.
Okay.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Right.
And the Ministry of Transportation is constantly evaluating and refining the program based on feedback and real-world data.
So it's a balancing act.
It is.
Trying to ensure safety without, creating unnecessary obstacles for operators.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, it's about finding that sweet spot.
Yes.
Where everyone benefits from a safer transportation system.
Exactly. It's a collaborative effort that requires open communication, continuous learning, and a shared commitment to excellence.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to express my gratitude for your expertise and insights.
Well, thank you.
It's been an enlightening journey.
It has.
I feel like I've gained a newfound appreciation for the complexities of commercial vehicle safety.
The pleasure's been all mine. And to our listener,
yes,
thank you for joining us on this exploration.
Yes, thank you.
Remember, safety is a shared responsibility.
It is.
And we can all contribute to a safer transportation system by staying informed, being vigilant, and advocating for continuous improvement.
And with that, we'll bring our deep dive to a close.
Sounds good.
Until next time, stay safe out there. All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to be looking at trucking regulations in Ontario. Specifically, we've got some excerpts from the official Ontario trucking guidelines.
These guidelines, they're really fascinating. It's not just about, telling drivers what to do. It's like they're showing us how to balance safety and efficiency in the trucking industry, Yeah. It's a tough job.
For sure. Okay, so right off the bat, the guidelines talk about these hours of service.
Right.
Now, most people probably think truckers are like driving for days on end, but it turns out there's actually a really strict limit on how long they can be behind the wheel.
Yeah.
Like, did you know that drivers have to have at least 10 hours off duty every day? Consecutively.
10 hours.
10, at least.
Yeah, that's right. It's a common misconception that truckers are always on the road. But, fatigue, man.
Yeah.
Huge safety risk. Not just for the drivers, but for everyone else out there sharing the road,
That makes sense.
So that 10-hour break, it's like resetting, giving those drivers a chance to rest up, recharge before they hit the highway again.
And it's not just about daily rest either, right?
Right.
There are also weekly and biweekly driving limits.
Yeah, there are actually a couple of different cycles. You've got a 7-day cycle, which limits the drivers to a maximum of 70 on-duty hours.
Oh, wow.
And then there's a 14-day cycle with a 120-hour limit.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting. Even within that 14-day cycle, they have to take a mandatory 24-hour off-duty period.
Oh, wow.
Like a mini vacation, just built right into their schedule. Got to disconnect, get some proper rest.
Wow. So I'm starting to see how, these regulations aren't really about restricting the drivers.
Yeah.
It's more about protecting them.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And everyone else on the road too, right?
Yeah.
And switching between those cycles, it's not like a simple thing. Like if a driver wants to move from the 7-day to the 14-day cycle, they can't just keep driving. They need a reset, Yeah. 36 consecutive off-duty hours for the 7-day cycle.
Oh, wow.
And get this, 72 hours for the 14-day.
72?
72. Serious stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting a headache just thinking about how to schedule all that. But there's another layer to this too, right?
Right.
Daily log.
Daily log.
This is where it gets really fun.
Yeah, well, you might think it's just a bunch of boring paperwork, but it's really more like a detective's notebook, you know?
Okay, yeah.
It's a detailed picture of their day.
Okay.
They record everything from their start time, which cycle they're following, odometer readings, names of any co-drivers. Like, it's all in there.
Hold on. Co-driver names.
Co-driver names, license plate numbers for every vehicle they drive, name and address of their employer.
Wow.
Even the specific address of their home terminal.
Wow.
It's all about accountability.
So it's a lot more than just like a to-do list. Like, what's the reasoning behind all of those details?
Well, I mean, for one thing, it helps regulators make sure everyone's following those, hours of service rules.
Oh, wait.
They can double check, make sure drivers aren't pushing their limits
Right.
or fudging their schedules or anything like that.
Gotcha.
But there's also another important reason for all that detail.
Okay.
Creates a transparent record.
Yeah.
Just in case, if there's ever an incident or, an investigation, like a black box for the industry.
So it's not just about following the rules. It's about being able to prove that you did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. Not every driver needs to keep those super detailed logs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
There are some exemptions based on the type of driving they do.
Okay.
So imagine a local delivery driver. They operate within, say, 160 kilometers of their starting point.
Okay.
And they return to that same location at the end of the day and only work for one company.
Okay.
They wouldn't need that full, super detailed log.
So someone like delivering groceries or making short hauls, they wouldn't necessarily need that same level of, record keeping.
Right, but even exempt drivers still got to follow those hours of service rules.
Right.
And their companies still have to maintain records. It's just, slightly different system.
Gotcha. So we've explored these hours of service rules.
Right.
We talked about how they're tracked.
Right.
But it's not just about, how long you drive.
Right.
It's also about how you drive.
Exactly.
And the guidelines also cover some pretty specific driving procedures, even for experienced truckers.
Absolutely. Even the most seasoned truck drivers out there, they got to follow those procedures, make sure everything's safe.
Yeah, makes sense.
Even something as basic as starting the engine,
Yeah.
Parking brakes got to be on, clutch pedal down, transmission and neutral, all before you even turn the key.
Gotcha.
And once the engine's running, there are those vital checks.
Yeah.
Oil pressure, air brake pressure, got to make sure those are good.
I always wondered about those air brakes. They seem way more complicated than just regular brakes.
Oh, yeah, they are. Air brakes are the key to stopping those massive vehicles safely, especially when they're fully loaded.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine trying to stop, a small house on wheels with the same brakes you use on a bicycle.
Right, doesn't work.
It's just a different game.
Okay, so air brakes,
Yeah.
big deal. What else about starting and stopping these rigs?
Well, here's a detail that might surprise you. The guidelines actually specify that drivers need to test their brakes within 15 meters of starting to move.
Really?
Yeah, it's like checking your brakes as soon as you pull out of the driveway.
Wow.
It's, they really take it seriously.
Yeah, that's a level of caution that I wouldn't have expected.
Right.
Yeah.
And before we move on, you can't forget about the transmission. Manual or automatic, doesn't matter. You got to be familiar with how it works, specific to that vehicle,
It's like learning the personality of your truck almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to, all those different transmissions. It really makes you think, driving one of those massive tractor trailers.
Right.
Totally different than handling a smaller box truck.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's like comparing a jumbo jet to a Cessna or something.
Exactly. And the guidelines really get into it. All the details about handling those big rigs.
Yeah.
It's crucial for drivers to really study that manufacturer's operating manual for their specific vehicle.
Yeah.
Because it's learning the unique personality of your truck.
Oh, okay.
Understanding all its little quirks, how it responds in different situations.
Right.
It's like a partnership,
Yeah.
driver and machine working together, to get that job done safely.
Yeah, for sure.
And speaking of safety, we got to talk about stopping procedures.
Okay.
Now, you might think, what's so complicated about stopping?
Right.
But with a truck, it's a whole different ballgame.
Okay. Yeah, I'm all ears. So what are some of the key things drivers need to keep in mind when they're, bringing those big rigs to a halt?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, anticipation.
Okay.
Got to anticipate stops well in advance.
Right.
That gives them enough time to react. Avoid any sudden braking, which, can be really dangerous when you're dealing with all that weight.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Especially with a fully loaded truck. I mean, imagine trying to stop like a small house on wheels suddenly.
Right, not pretty.
Not pretty at all.
Yeah. So thinking ahead, crucial for any driver, I guess.
Right.
But even more so when you're behind the wheel of, like a massive truck.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when they do brake, it's got to be smooth.
Yeah.
Gradual. No
Yeah.
slamming on the brakes unless it's a real emergency.
Okay.
That smooth braking helps them maintain control, minimizes wear and tear on the system.
Right.
It's all about finesse,
Okay.
treating those brakes with respect.
Right. But what about those situations where a sudden stop is, like, unavoidable?
Right. Well, that's where those anti-lock braking systems come in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, ABS.
Exactly. ABS. We've all heard about it in cars, but in trucks, it's even more critical because it prevents the wheels from locking up during hard braking,
Right.
which helps the driver maintain steering control and avoid jackknifing.
Okay. Yeah. I can see how that would be especially crucial with, like the longer stopping distances and all that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, those safe following distances, the ones we always hear about.
Yeah.
Even more important for truck drivers.
Right, for sure.
Gotta give them that time and space to react, to anything unexpected. But let's shift gears for a second.
Okay.
Let's talk about intersections.
Ooh, yeah, intersections. Even in a car, they can be tricky. So
Right.
I can only imagine.
Think about it. You're not just maneuvering a vehicle. You're maneuvering something that's like the length of a fire truck.
Right.
So when they're approaching a stop sign or a red light, they got to stop far enough back to have a clear view of cross traffic.
Right.
Allow other vehicles to make those right turns safely and all that.
Right. So it's not just about stopping. It's about, like, strategically positioning this huge vehicle. So
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
then when they're making turns, got to be extra careful about that turning radius. It's
Right.
not like whipping a car around a corner.
Right.
They have to swing wide to avoid hitting curbs or other obstacles,
Right. Yeah. I've definitely seen trucks make those, like, really wide turns.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost like they're doing a little dance.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why those pre-trip inspections, making sure those mirrors are properly adjusted is so important.
Oh, yeah. It makes a huge difference.
Huge difference, especially when you're dealing with tight spaces. Speaking of tight spaces, what about railway crossings?
Oh, yeah.
Those can be a little intimidating,
Yeah, I can imagine. Even for experienced drivers,
Oh, yeah. Railway crossings, they demand, the utmost respect and caution,
Right.
The first rule, always stop, look, and listen.
Right.
Never, ever try to beat a train.
Yeah.
Or assume you have enough time to cross, It's just not worth the risk. I bet those guidelines have some pretty specific procedures for, stopping at crossings.
Oh, I bet they do. What are those procedures?
So drivers got to stop their trucks no closer than 5 meters and no farther than 15 meters from the nearest rail.
Oh, okay.
That way, they've got a clear view in both directions and enough space to safely move forward, if they need to.
Right, so it's like finding that Goldilocks zone,
Yeah.
Not too close, not too far, just right.
Exactly. And once they've stopped, they got to listen carefully
Right.
for any approaching trains. Because remember, trains can be surprisingly quiet, especially at lower speeds.
Right. Yeah, those flashing lights
Yeah.
and the gates, they're not just there for decoration,
Exactly. They're there for a reason. And when it's safe to proceed, they got to cross slowly and steadily without shifting gears.
Okay.
This helps prevent stalling on the tracks, which is, you don't want to stall on the tracks.
No, not at all, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so railway crossings, we got to be extra careful. But they're not the only place, right? What about school zones?
Ah, yes. School zone.
Always got to be extra cautious there,
Oh, absolutely. We all know about those reduced speed limits, but there are also specific rules about, stopping for school buses.
Right.
Those flashing red lights on a school bus, it's like a giant stop sign for everyone,
Oh, yeah.
including truck drivers.
Right. So when those red lights are flashing, it's a complete stop for everyone.
Everyone, full stop. And for truck drivers, even more important to stop at a safe distance because remember, they need all that extra space to brake.
Right. Are there ever any situations where, you wouldn't have to stop for a school bus?
There's one exception. On divided highways, the ones with the median. Yeah.
Drivers traveling in the opposite direction of the bus, they don't have to stop.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, got to be extra vigilant,
Right.
Watch out for kids. It's all about putting safety first, especially when you've got little ones running around.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we've covered railway crossings, school zones. What about sharing the road with cyclists? That seems like it could be tricky with a big truck.
Sharing the road with cyclists, that's crucial for everyone. But for truck drivers, it's especially important.
Yeah.
Because that size difference, it can make cyclists feel pretty vulnerable.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
So truckers really need to be aware of their presence.
Right, right. So what are some of the things that truck drivers can do to make sure they're, sharing the road safely with cyclists?
Well, first of all, blind spots.
Okay.
Got to check those blind spots, super diligent about it.
Right.
Before changing lanes, making turns, the drill.
Yeah.
Cyclists can be hidden really easily, especially when they're riding alongside a large truck. Right. Those mirrors and those pre-trip checks we talked about before.
Oh, yeah, super important.
Really come in handy there.
Absolutely. And when they're passing a cyclist, got to give them plenty of space.
Okay.
The general rule is to allow at least 1 meter of clearance.
1 meter. Might not seem like a lot, but I bet it makes a big difference.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And it's also important to avoid, passing cyclists too closely when you're approaching an intersection.
Right.
Because they might need to make a left turn.
Right.
And, a truck cutting them off could put them in a dangerous spot.
Right. It's about, anticipating their movements.
Yes.
And giving them that space, so.
Exactly. And speaking of intersections, right turns, that's another tricky one.
Okay.
Because cyclists going straight through the intersection, they can easily get clipped by a right-turning truck.
Oh, right, yeah.
So always check those mirrors.
Right.
Blind spots, all that, before making any turn, especially a right turn. And, it's important to remember cyclists, they're vulnerable road users.
Right.
They don't have the same level of protection, as someone inside a vehicle.
Right, so it's really up to those drivers of larger vehicles to be, extra cautious and share the road responsibly.
Exactly. Treat those cyclists with respect, give them the space they need. It makes a huge difference in keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've talked about sharing the road with cyclists. What about driving at night? It seems like that would, add another layer of difficulty.
Driving at night, it's a whole different game for any driver, but especially for truck drivers.
Right.
Reduced visibility, fatigue, glare from oncoming headlights.
Yeah.
It can get, pretty dangerous.
Right. So what are some things that truck drivers can do to, stay safe when they're driving at night?
Well, first things first, headlights.
Got to make sure those headlights are properly adjusted.
Right.
And in good working order, of course.
Right.
So they can see the road clearly and other drivers can see them.
Right. It's amazing how something as simple as properly adjusted headlights can make such a big difference.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
For visibility and safety, everything. It's also important to reduce speed when you're driving at night.
Okay.
It gives them more time to react to anything unexpected.
Right.
And it minimizes the severity of any potential accidents,
So it's all about adjusting your driving habits to the conditions.
Yeah. Exactly. And speaking of adjusting, that glare from oncoming headlights.
Oh, yeah.
Got to be mindful of that.
Right.
They can reduce glare by, dimming their high beams when they're approaching other vehicles.
Right.
And avoiding looking directly at those oncoming headlights.
It's a good reminder that, we need to be aware of how our own actions are impacting other drivers' visibility. Absolutely. And then, of course, brakes.
Yeah.
Got to take breaks when you feel tired.
Right.
Because fatigue, that's a major factor in nighttime accidents. So listen to your body. Rest when you need to.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we've talked about, sharing the road with cyclists, driving at night. Now, what about adverse weather conditions? I imagine, rain or snow or fog.
Yeah.
Could make things pretty tricky out there.
Oh, absolutely. Adverse weather, it throws a whole new wrench in things,
Right.
Even for the most experienced truck drivers, rain, snow, fog, all that. It just reduces visibility, increases stopping distances, creates slippery road surfaces. It's just a whole different ballgame.
Right, for sure. So what are some of the key things that truck drivers can do to, stay safe when those conditions hit?
Well, the most important thing is to adjust their speed.
Okay.
got to slow down significantly.
Right.
When visibility is reduced or the road is slippery,
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I guess it sounds like common sense, but I can imagine it's easy to, like, overestimate your abilities when you're behind the wheel of, a powerful truck.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Got to remember, trucks take much longer to start than smaller vehicles.
Right.
Especially in bad weather.
Right. So those safe following distances, even more important.
Absolutely. Crucial. And got to be aware of hydroplaning,
It's hydroplaning. Oh, yeah.
When your tires lose contact with the road because of the water.
Right. That sounds scary.
It can happen so suddenly.
Yeah.
Lead to a loss of control.
Right. So how can they, like, avoid hydroplaning?
Best way, reduce speed.
Okay.
Avoid any sudden braking or steering. You also need to make sure those tires have enough tread to channel water away from the surface,
Right. Yeah, it's a good reminder to, check that tire tread regularly.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially, as we're heading into, like, the wetter months and all that.
Especially then.
Yeah.
It's crucial. And you got to be mindful of that spray. Oh, yeah.
The spray created by their tires.
Right.
That can really reduce visibility for other drivers.
Right.
So maintaining that safe falling distance, avoiding driving through big puddles, all that, it's about being considerate of the other drivers out there, trying to reduce those risks for everyone.
Right, exactly.
And then, snowy or icy conditions.
Yeah.
Got to make sure that truck's properly equipped, with snow tires or chains.
Right.
That gives them better traction, helps prevent those skids and slides.
Oh, yeah. I bet those winter driving skills are, like, essential for truckers here in Canada.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Essential. And then, of course, you got that danger of black ice.
Oh, yeah, black ice.
That thin, transparent layer.
Right.
Almost impossible to see.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying.
It is. It is. So, best way to avoid it, be extra cautious in shaded areas.
Okay.
Or on bridges and overpasses.
Right.
Because those areas tend to freeze first.
Okay. And if they do hit black ice,
Yeah.
It's all about staying calm, avoid sudden braking or steering.
Right.
Just gently steer in the direction you want to go.
It's like walking a tightrope or something.
Exactly. Got to stay balanced, focused.
Yeah.
And then, last but not least, driving in any adverse weather conditions, it just requires a higher level of concentration.
Right.
No distractions.
Yeah.
Just eyes on the road.
Eyes on the road. Okay, so adverse weather conditions, we talked about that. They required, like, a lot of skill and attention.
Right.
Now, what about mountain driving? Seems like that would present a whole other set of challenges.
Oh, yeah. Mountain driving, that's a unique beast,
Yeah.
Steep grades, sharp curves, unpredictable weather.
Right.
It's like a combination of everything we've talked about.
Right.
But turned up to 11.
Right. Okay, so what are some key things that truck drivers need to keep in mind when they're, navigating those mountain roads?
Well, first and foremost, maintain a safe speed.
Right.
Especially when you're going downhill.
Right.
And that engine braking system,
Engine braking.
can really help control speed.
Okay.
And it reduces wear and tear on those brakes.
Okay, so engine braking, that's where you, like, downshift.
Right.
To use the engine's resistance.
Exactly.
To slow the vehicle down.
Exactly. It's crucial technique for mountain driving.
Right.
Helps prevent those brakes from overheating.
Okay.
Becoming less effective.
Right, so engine braking for those descents.
Right.
Okay, what about going uphill?
Oh, well, when you're ascending those steep grades, it's all about selecting the right gear.
Right.
So you can maintain a steady speed, avoid overworking the engine.
Right.
You might need to downshift to a lower gear
Right.
just to keep that momentum going.
Right. It's about finding that balance between, like, power and control.
Exactly.
Yep.
And when approaching those sharp curves, got to slow down well in advance.
Okay.
Stay in your lane. No cutting corners.
Yeah.
Because, could lead to a rollover or a collision with oncoming traffic.
Oh, yeah, those mountain roads.
Unforgiving.
You really got to stay alert.
Absolutely. And then got to be aware of the potential for, rock slides or debris on the road.
Oh, right.
Especially after heavy rain or snow.
So extra vigilance, scanning the road ahead, all that.
This is crucial. Crucial. And then, finally.
Yeah.
Got to be prepared for those sudden changes in weather conditions.
Oh, right.
Mountain weather. It's unpredictable.
Right. Yeah, changes quickly.
Oh, yeah. So having the right clothing, emergency supplies.
Right, yeah, all that. Makes sense.
Absolutely. Mountain driving, it's just a different game.
Right.
You got to be prepared, ready to adapt to anything.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground in this segment.
We have.
From mountain driving to driving in adverse weather conditions, sharing the road with cyclists.
Lots of good stuff.
But, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's take a moment to, think about everything we've learned.
It's easy to just take the trucking industry for granted.
Right.
You see those big rigs out there on the highway. You don't always think about what it takes.
Yeah.
Keep them running safely.
I know, I'll never look at a truck the same way again.
Right, yeah.
Like those drivers, they're carrying a lot more than just cargo,
They are.
It's responsibility, expertise.
And a deep understanding of these regulations.
Oh, yeah.
And that brings us to, I think, one of the most important takeaways from our deep dive.
Okay.
These Ontario trucking regulations.
Yeah.
It's all about striking a balance,
right.
Between the need to move goods efficiently across the province,
right,
and the absolute necessity of safety,
right, for
everyone, drivers, everyone else on the road. Yeah.
Well, it's like walking a tightrope, On one side, you've got like the demands of, a fast-paced industry that keeps our economy moving. And then on the other side, you've got like, the responsibility to protect lives, prevent accidents.
And that's why those regulations are so detailed, so comprehensive.
Right.
They cover everything.
Yeah.
Driver fatigue, vehicle maintenance.
Yeah.
Challenges of driving in different weather conditions,
right.
navigating different types of roads.
Right.
It's like a giant puzzle where each piece represents, a different aspect of safety and responsible operation.
Yeah.
And when all those pieces fit together, that's when you create that framework that helps ensure, our roads are as safe as possible.
Right. And while some people might, see these regulations as like restrictive or burdensome.
Yeah.
They're actually designed to protect everyone.
Yeah.
The drivers, the company.
Everyone. The public.
The public, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like having a set of guardrails on a winding mountain road.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah. They might seem like a hindrance at times, but they're there to, keep you from going over the edge.
Exactly. And as we've seen, throughout this deep dive,
there
are a lot of potential hazards and challenges out there in the world of trucking.
Right.
But by establishing those clear rules, those procedures, ensuring that drivers are well trained, equipped to handle those challenges, Ontario's trucking regulations, they really help to mitigate those risks, and keep things running smoothly.
Yeah, they do. So the next time you're driving behind a truck, maybe stuck behind it on a steep hill or, navigating a busy intersection.
Right.
Just take a moment to appreciate the complexity of that whole operation. The driver's not just like steering a vehicle, they're managing this complex system governed by all these rules and designed to
prioritize
safety above all else.
That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
It's easy to overlook those invisible systems that keep our world running smoothly.
Yeah.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you a new appreciation,
It has.
for the crucial role that trucking regulations play.
Right.
In ensuring safety and efficiency of this vital industry.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive has, sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to keep exploring.
There you go.
Yeah, there's like a whole world of knowledge out there.
There is.
About, trucking and logistics and transportation.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe you'll even, consider a career in this.
Yeah.
This fascinating field. So thanks for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep on learning.
It's amazing how much we've learned about trucking in Ontario.
Right. Like, who knew it was so complicated?
It's way more than just, hopping in a truck and driving.
Yeah, it's a whole system.
It is. And those regulations, they're a big part of it.
Yeah, they really are. They keep everything running smoothly.
And safely, too.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's all about that balance, right? Safety and efficiency.
Finding that sweet spot, yeah. It's not easy.
No, it's not. But I think those regulations, they really help.
They do. They lay out the framework for responsible operation.
Right. Like, they're not just about restricting drivers.
No, they're about protecting everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Drivers, companies, the public, everybody.
Just like creating a culture of safety.
Yeah, and it works. I mean, think about how many trucks are out there every day.
It's a lot.
And accidents, they do happen, but they're not as common as you might think.
Right, and that's because of those regulations.
Yeah, they set the standards,
Hmm.
make sure everyone's on the same page.
And they're constantly evolving, too,
Yeah,
keeping up with new technologies.
right, like those electronic logging devices.
Exactly, making sure everything's accurate, transparent,
Yeah, it's pretty impressive when you think about it. Like this whole system, all these moving parts.
working together to keep things moving.
Right, exactly. And it all comes back to those guidelines we talked about.
Those are the foundation.
Yeah, the blueprint.
Yeah.
They tell everyone, how to operate safely and responsibly.
And that's really what it's all about, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that just about wraps things up for our deep dive into Ontario trucking regulations.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
I'll never look at a truck the same way again.
Me neither.
Yeah. It's amazing how much goes into keeping those big rigs rolling safely and efficiently.
It really is. And it's a testament to the hard work and dedication of everyone involved.
Absolutely. From the drivers to the companies to the regulators, everyone plays a part. So to all of you out there in the trucking industry, keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We hope you learned something new and maybe even gained a new appreciation for the complexities of this essential industry. And remember, whether you're behind the wheel of a car, a truck, or just walking down the street, safety always comes first. Until next time, stay curious.